Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Welcome to the home of common sense. We've got a lot to get through here. There's nothing, just as you're about to come on out and your producer says something right in your ear, literally in the split second as you open your mouth, and it makes you giggle. Big apologies. This is no laughing matter today, of course, because we know that Home Office figures have revealed the number of asylum seekers being housed temporarily in UK hotels has actually fallen for its lowest level in 18 months. And you might go, wow, that's amazing. Keir Starmer and that Home Secretary person, aren't they fantastic? They've done a blinding job on this. But deportations haven't gone up, which means all of those people that were in hotels have been put somewhere else. Where have they gone? This comes, of course, as 545 migrants crossed the Channel yesterday in 10 small boats. And, of course, against the backdrop of the news that the UK is handing out £8,000 to France for each Channel migrant that they stopped. I mean, this is woeful in every respect. Can you answer me this? Serious question. It's a very easy question to ask. I'm not sure if the answer is particularly easy. How does this migrant crisis end? How do you see this ending? We'll open the lines on that now. Also this afternoon, former Health Minister Lord Bethell has admitted that the NHS spending, which has doubled in 17 years, but has had no impact on the nation's health. We're still all sick and knackered. We've got bunions and gout and God knows what. We are no healthier for doubling the budget. And Labour has come under fire for its net zero dogma after energy bills failed to fall as much as the government had predicted, particularly Rachel Reeves, who was big on this. Nothing's happened. So yet again, more lies, more obfuscation, more fog to deal with. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. So, more than 500 migrants, 545 to be precise, nipped over the Channel yesterday to start a new life in the UK. Yeah, this was one of the busiest crossing of the year so far. The minute the clouds lift, the minute the rain stops, the boats just keep on coming. 545 people, 10 boats, the warmest day of 2026. As sure as night follows day, that's what will happen. Doubling the number that arrived the month before to more than 1,000. People smugglers have used, of course, this break in the weather to take advantage of it. And the bad news is that the weather is looking pretty good for the next couple of days at least. So we may see similar numbers. But some 74 people arrived on Tuesday in the first crossing for a fortnight. Wednesday's crossing took the number of small boat arrivals this year so far to 2,149. And I've said this tirelessly. I can't be the only person that spots this. These figures are so big and they're so regular that we've kind of lost sight of it. I mean, just think about that. How many weeks are we into 2026? What, 6 weeks or something? And 2,150 people have come into this country illegally. I mean, just that in itself. 20 years ago, that would have been a massive headline. Now it's a daily headline. Meanwhile, Britain's £175 million payment to France last year to tackle this very problem actually worked out at about £8,000 for every migrant stopped. So this is extraordinary. French patrols blocked, apparently, in 2025, 22,476 stops. However, 41,472 still made it to the UK. Former Borders Chief John Vine said this was clearly a flop. How does this story end? Where does this story end? 0344 499 1000. But don't worry about any of this because immigration is down. Yeah, it's right down. Sort of. There's still over 100,000 people claiming asylum in the UK. 100. This is up to the year up to December 2025. So these are the latest figures. Over 100,000 people claiming asylum. That in itself is a massive number. As for small boats, 41,000 arrived in that same time period. That, however, is a rise of 13%. This is where it also gets interesting. Of the 108 applicants processed in this same period, relating to 135,000 people, 42% were granted refugee or protection status. 58% were refused. Now, so you think, OK, so more people are getting refused. No, because refused applicants can then appeal their decision, and the number of outstanding appeals has been rising in recent years, of course, because they know which way that usually ends, creating pressure elsewhere in the system. So we've got tens of thousands of people waiting to be processed, tens of thousands of people getting a successful application when they put in for residency of some kind, tens of thousands of people crossing the channel on a daily basis, and tens of thousands of people coming over in various means and staying in hotels. And that's meant to be a picture of success. This is abject failure, and it's almost criminal failure. You know, there was a point in Donald Trump's State of the Union address where he said to the gathered masses, particularly aiming this at the Democrats, stand up if you think it's the government's first duty to essentially protect its people and its borders. And of course all the Republicans and a few other invited guests did stand up, and the Democrats just stayed sitting down because they didn't know what to do. And of course it was a big old bear trap that Donald Trump set there, because to stand up looks like they're endorsing him, to sit down makes it look like they don't give a hoot about the borders. But that's the place we are in now. That's literally the place we're in. We're a small old island, and we have tens and tens of thousands of people in different strands of this story. It's huge. But where does it end? How does the migrant crisis end? Peter Barnes is with us, who's going to solve this very problem right now. Peter, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Nothing like a, small problem to tackle on a Thursday morning.
We thought we'd give you an easy one to start with. Well, let's have a listen here then, because, of course, we've got Keir Starmer, who said, there's a great deal going on with France.
There's a great deal going on.
There's a great deal going on. I don't know in whose advantage it is. Let's have a listen to what Keir Starmer said on that deal with the French.
For the very first time, migrants arriving via small boat will be detained and returned to France in short order. In exchange for every return, a different individual will be allowed to come here via a safe route, controlled and legal.
Now, I don't know if it's me, Peter. Is there more than one deal going on with France here? Because prior to that, one out,
the
5,000 in, thing.
I call it pass the migrant.
Pass them, on the right-hand side. Prior to that, of course, Rishi Sunak had thrown a load of cash at the French and got, Mr Macron, here's some more money. And I think Starmer went, here's some more money as well. So it's £175 million paid to France, but it works out that we're paying £8,000 per migrant. Why are we paying for French border force? I mean, that's not an unreasonable question. And what do you make of this overarching picture and these figures today?
Well, it brings into mind, there's two quotes. So there's lies, damn lies and statistics, and 72% of the statistics are made up on the spot. That's what this seems to be to me, because it's
apparently 4% aren't.
Well, apparently, but this is the rather ridiculous situation we find ourselves in, because what it actually shows us is that we don't have a deterrent. We have disruptions, and it's because of the weather. That is fundamentally what this shows. It shows the government has absolutely zero control on the number of people that are coming to the United Kingdom via the small boats or any other situation. Because one thing I'm very happy these numbers show is the legal migration side and how that ballooned out of control. We hyper-obsessed, but rightly so, I think, on the small boats crisis, but it's the legal side that was always the bigger problem. And it's, it is some welcomed news on that front, but on the overall picture, it's absolutely catastrophic. It is criminal, in my opinion, and I think how anybody at the Home Office still has a job defies all logic and understanding, but then you remember it's Britain, it's 2026, and nobody gets fired. But yeah, it's just rather ridiculous, really. But to answer your question as to when does this stop, the answer is it doesn't. This is going to be part of our life, part of the British civil society now, and if not most of Europe's problem for the next, 100 years minimum, realistically, because everything is now in a consistent state of change. So we're having industrial revolution, we're having social revolutions, everything is changing, and unfortunately our government and probably our systems really are so slow, so archaic, that they are just not up to scratch. But the failure really pinpoints down to the fact we had no rate of return. So basically, we gave France all this money, and we just said, please do something. We didn't attach any kind of riders to it, we didn't attach any conditions to it. There was nothing really there to say, you've got to do something. And, you know, I don't really blame the French for, you know, not doing anything, because, you know, there was no obligation to it. And also, Macron played an absolute blinder because Keir Starmer was over a barrel on this issue. He had to agree to something, and the terms were always in France's favour.
What's interesting about this, of course, we're asking the question, how does this crisis end? Some people, I'm sure, will get in touch and say, it ends when we have a reform government or a Restore Britain government. Now, this is going to be really interesting. Gwaine Towley, you'll be familiar with Gwaine. You know, a big voice in the reform inner circle, as it were. He very openly said, look, Reform have got a year to prove themselves. They won't get any more than that. And so this thing has got to reverse quite quickly. The issue isn't just channel migration. We know that as a percentage, it's not the biggest part of the story, but it's significant. The optics are terrible, and it's symbolic, really, of ineptitude and failure. So just imagine that tomorrow, Rupert Lowe is the Prime Minister of this country. How quick can this story turn around?
Realistically, 2 years. Realistically, to get the legislation through, and that is dependent upon having a majority in the House of Commons and a very amiable House of Lords. If you don't have that sorted, it's all nonsense. This is why it is absolutely crucial whoever becomes the next government has a very clear policy on this stuff and has a plan to implement, because it's really easy to run around saying you want to have all these deportations, but unless you actually know how you're going to do it in terms of get the legislation through, you know, it's all for moot, because the blob is going to stop you. It's going to be lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. We all know it's coming, and this is why every political party who wants this kind of stuff has to be ready. That's why they have to be held to criticism and actually held to a high standard to make sure when they do get into office, whoever it is actually can implement something for a change.
But do they... look, Rupert Lowe could come in, Nigel Farage could come in, Ben Habib could come in and say, right, from tomorrow, there's, you know, anyone that comes over in a boat's going to be, you know, we're going to deal with very quickly. What does that actually look like in practice? Because even if you pulled out of the ECHI, you could do all this stuff. The boats could keep on coming once those people arrive. The boats, I don't think any of those parties are seriously going to put those people back on another boat and take them back to France. That's probably not going to happen. They might suggest it would. I think it's tricky. I know Richard Tice gave a very eloquent explanation to me on this programme a little while back about how it can be done. But even there, there's implications, so you might still have a period of time where these people are here. And they've got to be accommodated or put somewhere.
Yes, definitely. So I would say, realistically, the way that it works is you've got to have the legislation ready to introduce on the very first day, and then hope to God you can push it through, make sure it's airtight and everything is already in place, so it can pass through the cycle pretty quickly. If you have a whopping majority, a one-line bill can literally pass in a day.
Indeed.
If you don't have the majority, it can take a very long time, because it will be held up in report stages and committee stages, as all legislation will be. They then might have the ping pong between the House of Commons and the House of Lords. That's a predicted thing. But I will say that in terms of what the government can do is actually then say, OK, well, we can't get rid of you, but what we can do is we can move you into detention centres. We can change the operation of to how people are treated when they're here. And I think the big thing is we stop giving them money, we stop the incentives. That's day one.
To stop that.
You've got to do it.
Even Macron said that himself.
Every European nation leader is saying the same thing.
Steve makes this point. A few others have made the same point. Illegal migrants end when we start taking away French fishing rights. Is that... it's a very seductive line.
Yes.
Is it true?
Right, OK, so this is quite interesting. It's one of the reasons that we continue to pay the French is because if they start not doing even what they're doing now, this problem actually gets a lot worse. And then you also have the problem of got to keep Turkey on side, because if Turkey turned the tap on in terms of open the floodgates of migrants, we have a whole other different problem. You know, this idea that Britain can just do this alone is not right. It's not correct, because it is an international problem, and it's all about kind of disrupting the flow on the smuggler routes and all that kind of stuff. It is a lot of it is stopping the boats actually getting in the water in the first place, but then you've got to stop them getting the boats and make all the business stuff. It is a very, very complex thing. So yes, I can understand why people want to pull the fishing rights. However, they can start to pull things away from us, and then you don't want to get into a trade war with France because, you know, there's a lot of other things going on where we kind of need their help.
Indeed. Let's move to this story, Peter. Former Health Minister Lord Bethell has revealed that NHS spending has doubled in 17 years with no impact on the nation's health. Goodness me. Boris Johnson flooded the NHS, of course, with more funding. Labour will argue they're putting even more in. Many at the time said it still needs more money. Let's have a listen to what Boris had to pledge.
My job is to make sure that we use the funds that go into the NHS to reduce the time you wait to see your GP, the time you wait in A&E, and that's why we're doing it today. I want to stress this is new money. This is new money. Don't forget that this is 1.8 billion of new money, delivering 1.8 billion of new money.
How many times did he say new money then?
Yeah.
Well, 17 years ago, it was 100 billion, the budget. Now it's 200 billion, and nothing has really changed. We're still sick and knackered. We've got bunions and gout and all manner of scabby problems. So nothing's happened. What a waste of money.
Oh, I think it is a complete waste of money because fundamentally it is the kind of the deification of the NHS that has actually been the big problem. We won't reform it because let's be real, when it was its 75th anniversary, we had a church service for it and thanked God for its existence. I mean, when you put something on a pedestal that high, how are you actually going to be able to save the thing? You then have doctor strikes and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
COVID was devastating for it, but I do think one of the bigger things in this report is the ticking time bomb of the demographics. In fact, the fact we're going to have so many people over the age of 75 compared to young people having children, and all that issue is absolutely going to devastate this nation in terms of its kind of welfare state and the NHS. We have to get into our heads that if you want to save the NHS, you have to start moving from a kind of treat after you've got ill to preventative health. That seems to be the big shift and why most European nations seem to be a lot better at kind of, health spending, because they focus on tackling things such as childhood obesity rather than...
But we know all of this.
Yes,
this is the bit
because the thing is we don't take personal responsibility.
But we've never had, more information.
Yes.
From celebs releasing exercise videos to clinics and weight loss, obesity scares, an explosion of gyms, park runs, God knows what else. I mean, we've never had more chance to get fit, and yet we're a fagged out, fat old bunch of sickos. Yeah, we're dying. And we don't know what to do about it, Peter.
A lot of it is actually linked to the economy because a lot of people are because wages haven't risen, living standards have dropped, so therefore you've got to move to cheaper food, which is often more processed and not as good for you. So actually a lot of it is economics based.
Average lifespan for a man is 79. That's the same as it was in 2009. Hasn't changed. Lifespans span for a woman is 83. Now, they talk about sexual equality.
Oh, yes.
This is a policy that no government has tried to tackle. Women are living too long, I think, is the problem here.
My father always likes to say, we just wanted to rest.
Indeed. And they get 4 extra years on us. So...
Yeah, but we get 4 years.
Of which we're paying for as well.
Oh, yeah.
So... men are paying for women to live longer than them.
Yes, I will.
This is sexism of its worst kind.
Well, you do have to look at the difference between the rollout of the kind of the prostate cancer stuff and compared to breast cancer. There is actual health inequalities there, but realistically, in the report, we do have a big serious problem of maternity and midwife.
Yes,
and all this kind of
story
stuff.
Today.
That's a huge story, really. And it's about resource allocation. It's about actually confronting problems that communities have. But I will say, when it comes to the kind of men versus women thing, we do have to address that because obviously you have problems of men's mental health and all these issues as well that are just not taken seriously by society at large. Because I always like to say, the minute a man actually bothers to speak up, he gets told to sit down.
Sir Jonathan Van Tam, I remember him from the old COVID briefings.
Yeah.
He was one of many. He warns of a demographic time bomb, urging re-engineering towards prevention and early intervention. Well, we know what we're meant to do. How many are living by that rule book? All the while there are burger joints and chicken parlours littered all over the place.
Oh, yeah. It's all down to personal responsibility. In other words, I always think that we've become a little self-indulgent and a bit entitled. In other words, we think that the NHS is there to kind of... it's our service. In other words, you should make me better. But unfortunately, if you want to have it, you've got to be responsible with it. And, maybe you shouldn't have that burger. You shouldn't have that extra pint if you want to really keep it. If you do love the NHS, your lifestyle is not reflecting it.
Indeed. Just do it right. You two could look like this. So
you could look like this.
See, there you got two visions
two very
of your
different ways of going.
Lines are open on all of this. How does the migration crisis end? Straightforward question. I know it's a tricky answer. Your thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Breaking news in the last couple of moments. Extraordinary news. The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is.
Mr. Mandarin, how long do you think that you can stay on the island?
We're going to stay forever. Our rights have to be respected now. We're going to stay.
Do you expect Jeremy Clarkson to become a part of your new party?
I can tell you, if Jeremy Clarkson decided to darken my doorstep, I would be absolutely delighted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. I'm going to mention, I don't think you mind me mentioning this, Peter. We were just talking about this during the break. But Peter has just revealed that he has all four grandparents still alive. All over 100.
All over 100, yeah. And me, my dad and my grandfather are born on the same day.
Yeah, you, your dad and his dad, all born on the same day.
We're all called Peter.
And you're all called Peter.
Yeah. We're efficient. And my grandmother likes to say that they don't die because of spite.
Yeah, I like that. You see, you thought the Addams family were curious. I mean, until you met the Barneses, you don't know anything.
Yeah, keeping up with the Barneses is
but
quite
I mean, they must have led good lifestyles if they all lived to 100.
Not at all.
Really?
If think about it. When you see all these people who make it to such an old age, they always say that, oh, it's a bottle of red wine, it's this, it's always the people that do fun runs that seem to drop down at 35.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Where I used to live in Bromley, I used to go shopping in, I think it was a Sainsbury's that was nearest to me. And I'd go there, and I always, for some reason, every time I went there, I used to see this same old lady, this dear old girl. She used to walk with her trolley. She was like about 172, this woman, and off she'd go. She'd around this thing, and then I'd see her get into her car. Her journey from the supermarket to her car in the car park was about 3 days. She almost ordered a taxi to get to her own car. But what she used to do, she used to get in her car and light a cigarette.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, wow, you've dodged the bullet, love.
Yes.
You've dodged the sea bullet on that. Because whatever else is wrong with you, you're a bit slow. She must have been over 90. But the idea that she did her shopping, sat there in her car, and lit a Rothmans. Yeah,
I would say the big thing...
Good for her.
Yeah, definitely. Is actually being sociable. Is actually being in a group of friends. That's a big, big factor.
Yeah. What if you're like me, who find people mostly annoying?
Oh, see, you end up like me.
Depends who you're with.
I mean, I turned 35 a couple of weeks ago, but yes.
There you go. But you're still, there's nothing wrong with being a grumpy middle-aged man.
35, middle-aged.
What is officially...
In my family, I'm a child.
What is officially... Yeah, well, indeed, yes. You're a little whippersnapper.
Yes,
As young Peter finished school, yeah?
Yes, pretty much.
Working now. Let's move to this story. Labour coming under fire over its net zero dogma. This is after energy bills failed to fall as much as Rachel Reeves had promised. Let's have a listen to the man himself, the eco-evangelist that is Ed Miliband.
Truth is, our country remains in the grip of fossil fuel markets controlled by petrostates and dictators. That's why our energy bills are so high. There is an answer: clean, homegrown power that we control. But to bring it to people's homes, we need to build the transmission infrastructure to make that happen.
Well, yesterday, of course, they were celebrating, saying, oh, it's amazing we brought your energy bills down, which you hadn't really, because they moved 90 quid of the 150 reduction onto general taxation, which isn't saving, and they added 66 quid to network costs, and gas prices have fallen by more than bills anyway. So it was a bit of a playing with numbers.
Yes.
This is not down to Miliband brilliance.
Oh, those two words should never be in a sentence unless it's without brilliance.
That's
because,
true.
I will say that this is a lot of creative accounting because the Labour Party have been really caught out on this. Ed Miliband has absolutely no idea how the energy sector actually works. He has no idea how the price cap works. We shouldn't call it a cap because it keeps moving, by the way. But I will say that sometimes bills can go down because of this stuff. But the major factor is actually the price of gas. And we are literally living and dying by this every single day because we don't have our own independent energy supply, despite the fact that we're literally standing on it. And, we've got decades of this stuff under the ground. We've got the North Sea, and we refuse to do it. The more we refuse, the more volatility we will have, and the higher our bills will be. We will not get economic growth with this level of energy price. We just won't.
Which political party is going to drill, baby, drill?
Realistically, none of them, because no one has actually come out and said that they're going to pull back and withdraw the Climate Change Act. Until you do that, nothing can happen, because it's all of this stuff is baked into law. Government departments and the budgets are all bound by this green agenda. Our entire economy is so linked to it. To actually just pull out of it straight, cut, as like Nigel Farage wants to do, and I think Restore as well, that would send us into an economic shock that would make, the Liz Truss budget look like child's play.
Because there's too much else.
So much is wrapped into it. You'd also irritate every major company, particularly the car industry, because you keep moving the targets. That's a big, big problem.
See, that's dare I say, a sort of Fabian philosophy where you interlink things to the point that to deconstruct them is actually too much hassle. I think I'm also right in saying that quite a lot of our green policies are interlinked with the EU as well.
Oh, yes. We basically just mirror them, which makes, I think it's Peter Kyle's comments today about Britain wants closer ties and all this stuff. No, we don't, because Europe is on a trajectory of downwardsness. It's a spiral of doom because of their energy policies. Just look at the state of Germany. The idea of pushing more into this is absolutely ridiculous. What we should be doing is renewable energies are not bad. We should be investing heavily in the research of them, but we still have to live in the real world and actually continue to drill, baby, drill, and actually have our own energy security, because as the world gets more volatile, we become more dependent. And unfortunately, the nations that have the oil and the gas, not on our side of the walls, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Final one here. Your party. Your party is, of course, the name of a party. Your party has named its leader, because they've been rudderless officially. There was the kind of Zara Sultana Corbyn battle. They've had a bit of a powwow between it, and they've now got a leader. And that leader is Jeremy Corbyn. He won the gig, and I think both of their supporters voted for him. So let's have a listen to what he said about your party.
Your party is going to be democratic, and your party is going to be inclusive, and your party is going to be a place of activity, of campaigning, of purpose.
I mean, talk about vacuous platitudes. Your party, what was the first thing you said? Is going to be democratic. Well, I mean, who starts a political party other than Kim Jong-un and says, your party is going to be not democratic? You're going to have no rights. There'll be no campaign.
It also sounded like a threat with the music behind it. The way that was put together is like, or else, which is often Jeremy Corbyn's big thing. But it is interesting because they still have this kind of collective executive council, and what it basically means is that Corbyn's group controls the council. But it's very important coming up, because it will be about branding, it's about media oxygen, it's about actually having a kind of stable leader and a kind of seriousness behind the party. I still think this group, no matter how much of a joke they are, has shown there is a movement behind them. If they get competent backing and a little bit of structure, they could actually upset things. a lot. And I mean, it is not just, you know, the Labour Party that will suffer, the Greens, the Lib Dems, and all this kind of stuff. But obviously, certain things happening today that we can't talk about. But I will say, we can't underestimate this lot. We shouldn't treat them as a joke, because we did that when they were leader of the Labour Party, and he nearly won in 2017. You have to remember that. The man was very, very close to being Prime Minister. He's not in, it might be a bit of a, not our taste of politics, but it doesn't mean that the country doesn't often get swayed by people like that.
Indeed. Peter, we've hit the clock. You are released, sir.
Yes.
Thank you very much indeed. Always good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Peter Barnes, political strategist, with us on the programme. You want to pick up on anything you've heard there, you can do. And the kind of key question we started off with those new migration figures, big old mixed picture on that one. How does the migration crisis end? How do you think this realistically ends? 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This from Reg, who says, hand on heart, Ian, I think there's going to be a massive civil unrest in this country shortly before the government just do not know how to deal with this immigration problem, and they probably know what they have to do, but they're too afraid to. And what happens then? The public rise. There is that real sense, and whilst I get it, okay, people always throw out that line that channel migration is not, it's only a small percentage of the overarching picture. Right, I understand that. It's basic mathematics. It's still, that small percentage is massive, by the way. Look at those numbers, 41,000 people who came across in the last year. That is up 13%. 41,000 people. Now, the reason that is more significant than perhaps other figures around immigration is down purely to the optics of this, which highlights graphically the ineptitude of governments, that you can just jump on a rubber boat and essentially float over the English Channel and begin life in another country. And while you're there, you'll be looked after, and you get, look, I don't want anybody to suffer or starve or anything like that. You know, we're a civilized people. I understand that, and maybe sometimes to our cost. However, it doesn't matter whether you're left wing or right wing. If nothing else, look at the economics of this. The hotel bills, the amount of money we're paying France, 175 million quid. It's costing us £8,000 per migrant to stop people coming into this country. These figures are all over the place. I mean, that number in itself, I'm pretty sure there was other funding that has been given to Macron. I don't know what he did with it. Maybe he bought his wife I don't know, a new facelift or something. Who knows? Nonetheless, it's a lot of cash, but Keir Starmer seems to think it's a good deal. Let's have a reminder.
For the very first time, migrants arriving via small boat will be detained and returned to France in short order. In exchange for every return, a different individual will be allowed to come here via a safe route, controlled and legal.
Controlled and legal. It just never sounds like somebody You know, when I see Starmer, it's a little bit like when you go to a school sports day and there's always that kid that's just not going to do very well and you're thinking, come on, young scamp, you can do it, even though he's falling over and he's never going to make it in a million years. But you sort of half want him to because he's at your kid's school, and that's Starmer for you, isn't it? Let's get a word from Annunziata Rees-Mogg, former Brexit Party MEP and all-round good egg. Annunziata, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. I mean, I do find it increasingly difficult to kind of, you know, when I hear Keir Starmer speak, I instinctively want to start gnawing my own elbows. I'm surprised I've got any elbows left, frankly. I think about this deal with the French. I mean, let's start on that, for goodness sake. 175 million quid, £8,000 per migrant. They've got the 1 out, 10,000 in deal going on, which I don't know how many deals have we done with the French? Rishi Sunak threw a ton of money over there as well.
I think overall we've sent the French about 700 million, 175 million in the last year. And as you say, that's 8,000 per migrant they've supposedly stopped. I'm glad they're stopping some, but that seems quite a high price to be paying for it. Then we've got this 1 in, 1 out. Well, if you've got 41,000 coming and you send one back and you take another one, you've got 41,000 people coming. Yeah. It doesn't change the maths at all. But actually, even that's not working. It's less than 1% of arrivals since in 2025 were sent back on this deal. And we've taken more than we've sent back. So we've sent back 305, just unbelievably small number, illegal migrants to France, but we have taken 367.
This is genius territory.
Doesn't even work out. It is such a moronic policy that only someone like Keir, who is so obsessed with the law, international law, and not British interests, could ever have come up with such a bad deal.
Indeed. And you can almost hear future generations, 100 years' time, you know, a couple of sage-like characters sitting there on a rock overlooking the channel, telling the story how once upon a time people just used to jump on a boat and come and live here. And it went, no way, surely people stopped them. No, nobody stopped them. In fact, they were accommodated, fed and given money. Now, yes, we are civilised people. This is clearly unsustainable. I've long argued that, you know, if nothing else, the economics don't stack up. The cost of the hotels, the cost of the money we send to the French, all manner of other financial issues involved in this. I mean, this is billions and billions per year is being spent on this. So even if people aren't buying into the kind of reform or restore or even conservative view, everybody can surely see this cannot carry on.
Well, it's also very dangerous that if you want to come at it from a purely humanitarian point of view, making it attractive for people to risk their lives in February weather to come across the channel in a small boat is not a good way to achieve your aims. That it is undoubtedly dangerous and people do die. And they've also risked their lives on that journey, but paid overall millions and millions to people smugglers. Dangerous criminals, and we shouldn't be encouraging that either. Of course, Keir Starmer's mantra before the election was, we'll smash the gangs. Yeah. He has done nothing but encourage.
You're absolutely right. But is there look, you know, Reform make a lot of noise about this. I've spoken to Richard and to Nigel many times. They say, you know, there is a plan. Richard Tice came on the show not that long ago and outlined how, you know, there are maritime and international laws that will allow removals very swiftly. Somebody like Rupert Lowe, should he become Prime Minister, has said, you know, he can deal with this almost within the hour. I mean, he's absolutely incandescent on this. I'm sure Ben Habib would have the same thing. Is that ever likely to happen? Could we have if we had an election tomorrow and any one of those three parties were to get into power, or even the Conservatives, and Kemi Badenoch is now saying, no, we've learned our lessons, we will deal with this. Do you believe any one of them will deal with it swiftly?
I think any one of them could deal with it swiftly if there's the political will to do so. And I think all of those parties you've mentioned, including the Conservatives, have outlined how they could do this. Of course, Keir Starmer scrapping the Rwanda plan, which was the biggest deterrent we had against people wanting to come here, has had disastrous consequences and is undoubtedly feeding into the increase in numbers coming across the channel. But I think you've got to question how, if when people arrive on a small boat, they are processed in half an hour and sent off to a hotel, a military base, or increasingly houses of multiple occupation, HMOs, how they can do that in half an hour. And yet it takes them years to work out who they are, where they can send them, whether they can return them, all of that side of things. Why can we find out who people are to let them stay, but not find out who they are to make sure that they go home? And of this 41,000, every single one claimed asylum here. And of those, 48% will be granted of all asylum claims, but it's virtually 100% of the ones who come across in illegal boats. They know they haven't just got a hotel for 6 months or a year. They haven't just got a free phone and dentistry and all the other things we've all read about, but they've got a ticket to Britain for life. And that is what the huge cost to the British people is.
Absolutely right. And there's also another number in here that, you know, again, more food for thought, more heady evidence of ineptitude. The number of asylum seekers being housed temporarily in UK hotels has apparently fallen to its lowest level for 18 months. I mean, it's still a staggering nearly 31,000 people staying in hotels that everybody else is paying for. But, of course, deportation figures didn't reflect that. It essentially means, and I think it was alluded to there, that these people would have then therefore been placed somewhere. It's no good claiming, oh, look, we've shut the hotels, if you've simply placed people living elsewhere. You've just moved the problem and arguably created a bigger one.
Absolutely they have, and of course arguably they have, because instead of being in concentrated centres where at least the police in theory, even if not in practice, could keep some kind of eye on them, they're being spread out in communities, but normally in quite concentrated areas. It's much harder to keep tabs on who they are, what they're doing. But, you know, we look at the system and yes, removals have gone up. But we had 60,000 refusals for long-term asylum here last year and 10,000 removals.
Yeah.
You've still got only a 1 in 6 chance of actually having to leave the country. And a lot of those were paid to leave.
Indeed, Pete, so just to compound the jaw-dropping nature of this whole story, you're right, many people are actually given money to leave after they came to a place they had no right to come to. Of course, you have others on that list who are appealing there. So it's all very well the government saying, we actually deport more people, refuse more people rather, than we accept. But if you have an appeals process that then allows another 50% of that number to stay, then you're actually in the territory of 75–80% of people get the green light to remain.
And all of that time, we are paying for them. But even if at the end of all of the relentless appeals, many of which go to the ECHR, which we must leave, but we mustn't just leave that. We've got to scrap the British Human Rights Act, which enshrines that into British law. But even after all of those appeals, if they're successful, they're a net drag on our economy. And we have got to look out for the British people first. We've got homeless British people on our streets. We have got people who can't afford general life, who are in work and are having to use food banks. And yet we are providing for people from across the world who just want a better life in our country. We can't afford to do that in financial terms, but we definitely shouldn't be doing that in moral terms.
In your experience, Annunziata, how does this story kind of play out over other countries across Europe, those within the EU bloc? You know what money wasting looks like, because you worked in Brussels. And goodness me, if ever anyone wants a PhD level lesson in how to throw money down the drain, just look at a place that has, well, not one but two parliaments. I mean, that in itself is, you know, a cue for a big debate, but everything else that goes with it. Was this subject, you know, did other fellow MEPs, even if they weren't of, you know, similar political stripes as you, did this come up? Like, do the Spanish talk about this much? To the French? To the Germans? I mean, we know some of the stories from those countries, but how are other similar-sized economies faring in this same discussion?
Oh, well, Spain has just given amnesty to millions, and I think that's a huge worry for the whole bloc, because, of course, there's then free movement amongst all the EU countries, and thank goodness we're not part of that. The other countries generally were very worried. I mean, if you look at Italy, they had, I think the island is called Lampedusa. There's a very good novel called The Leopard set on it.
Okay.
But Lampedusa had more illegal immigrants than it did population. And they were deeply worried about the effect it was having. But they set up camps. And deterrence, so that illegal migrants didn't want to come. Germany has seen the rise of the AfD because they're standing against the waves of migration Germany has seen. But if you look at it in the round, our figures are worse than the EU's.
Yeah. Sadly, that is the case, and at the moment there is no solution, it seems, on the horizon, certainly not under this government. Annunziata, thank you as ever. Great to have you on. Always good to see you. Annunziata Rees-Mogg, former Brexit Party MEP, political voice and contributor on a range of issues, and that's just one big, fat issue right there, isn't it? The figures that have come out, which you'll hear ministers, by the way, over the coming days bragging about how you're beginning to see the numbers come down. No, you are not. These are lies. And when you ask the question, how does this migration crisis end? Lenny in Ashford says the answer to your question is put someone in charge who wants to stop the boats. Yes, I mean, that's kind of, I mean, it's route one stuff, isn't it? Somebody who actually wants to do it would be a start. This one from Barry. Afternoon, Ian. I always thought that if you remove the incentives, the migrants will stop coming, says Barry. You would think so. Another one here. The start things off for illegal migration, make a law. If they have no ID, passports, etc., they have zero right to anything and are detained in purpose-built detention centres, and then they are sent back to France. The problem with that is that if you are a genuine case of an asylum seeker, you're likely to have no ID and papers if you've just legged it from an inevitable war zone. And I think international law says you don't need any papers to claim asylum. And it's almost this game that the migrant has to play with the border force of whatever country, in this case ours, of convincing them that, like, how does that work out? No one has ever really. We need a good documentary. I'm happy documentary makers to front this documentary where we can actually sit in on a series of interviews, literally at the pivotal point when somebody claiming asylum is being questioned, and what questions are fired at them. How do they authenticate the answer? So if somebody says, for example, Eritrea, by the way, is the #1 country for people, it moves around a bit, but at the moment it's Eritrea on the list of countries that are the population country that is coming most commonly, if I can put that in one straight sentence, to the UK, along with, I think Iran is on that list, Somalia is on that list, Syria is on that list, but Eritrea is #1. So fella comes over from Eritrea and says, I can't go back to Eritrea because I am gay or something. And my country doesn't really support gay rights too well, so I can't go back. What does the border force person then say? Does the border person say, well, can you prove you're gay? I don't know where that conversation could possibly go, because the guy's going to say, well, I can't really prove it. No, I can't prove I'm gay. You come over from Iran and you say, well, it's a very, Muslim-led country, but I've converted to Christianity. how do you prove that person hasn't converted to... So I go back to Iran. If I nip down to Tehran High Street, they're going to hang me by the what's-it because I'm now a Christian, and that's a terrible thing to do in Iran. How do you prove that is not the case? How do those interviews even work? 0344 499 1000. We'll go straight to your calls in a couple of moments. Lines are open, 10 to 2. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. John says, I think realistically to end the boat crisis is to be tough. Turn them back. If it means a standoff with France, Europe, etc., let's do it. End of days. We are Brits. We are leaders, not wet wipes. That's after we left the human rights legislation, etc., and still continues. And there is the risk, as many people saying, we'll cut off the fishing rights of the French, and then the French could cut off a load of stuff with us, and then you're having a battle, and then the EU side with France, and then Germany go, oh, we're going to cut off stuff with the Brits. That is the calculation that Nigel Farage or Rupert Lowe or somebody like that, if they formed a new government, they would have to make that calculation. When you're not in government, you can say it out loud as often as you like. When you get there and somebody comes along and says, yes, you could do that, you could do the fishing rights, you do also realise that they would instantly cut off X, Y and Z, followed by Spain, followed by Germany. They would also do the same thing. I don't know specifically what those threats would be, but that is the terrain they'd be forced to deal with. How brave can somebody be? Let's go to John in Newcastle on this point. John, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Well, basically this, as we go along the road, when I was 15, that was a long time ago, we had 30 million people on this island of Britain. Now we have 60 million? No. Now we have 70 million. And as from yesterday, it's 70 million plus nearly another 500, and so on and so on and so on. And it's just unacceptable. We've got to get rid of these people in that sense by the thousands. And I believe, yes, and you might have something to say about what the other countries might do with us, like Jersey and the Channel Islands, you know, and this, that, and that. But the reality is that we've got to stop it here. We cannot go any further. It's just not on. I've never blamed the French, because the point is, them people have come to France, but they don't want to stay in France. And believe me, I've been to France every year for years. And it's a lovely place, beautiful places. But the fact is that the French won't give them a hotel or 3 square meals a day or £38 in spending money a week. But Tory government or Labour government does and still is, and it's not on.
But you're right, but they're the people that are at the... Because you could say, and I don't say this in fairness to the French, John, but I'm guessing the French don't want all those people on the northern border of France, right? I mean, it's a right mess over there.
Of course it
So
is.
they don't want it either, which you'd think they would also have some kind of incentive in place, or not incentive, a system in place that would stop them arriving in the first place.
Yeah. Will you see it's a landlocked?
Oh, John, your phone line has literally just gone on us. You may be able to hear me, but I can't hear you. But listen, I got your broader point there. And of course, France does take asylum seekers. So the people on the northern coast of France are those that literally just want to come to the... They're not people who've necessarily failed. I mean, they might be, but generally speaking, they are people who specifically want to come to the UK. Paul is in Brighton on this point. Paul, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Hi.
Yeah, the point I was going to... Well, 2 points, actually. The main one is you were talking about illegal and legal migration.
Yeah.
I think the simple fact is that we're just full up, period.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need any legal migration at all. Our justice system's not working, our health system's not working, our schools are not working, our infrastructure isn't there. We just simply cannot cope. We've got... How many people unemployed now? 5% of the working
and that figure is great. But what do we do about areas where we do need, I don't know, neurosurgeons? I'm not talking about the joke of somebody coming over on a boat and pretending they're a scientist, but genuine neurosurgeons. A fella comes from Nigeria or something.
Well,
what do we do in those cases?
I'm going to sound like I'm sort of backtracking to say, well, we should take on specialists, but I don't know why we haven't got our own homegrown talent. We've got all these children that are going... I mean, all the children that were sent to young people that were sent to university by the Blair government, which I think was a bit of a cynical ploy just to massage the unemployment figures.
100%.
Because if you're in full-time education, you're not deemed to be unemployed.
Correct.
But I don't know why we aren't... We didn't go along. We scrapped all the apprenticeships, so that's why we supposedly needed all the Eastern European builders. I think by the same token, why did we disregard medical training?
Yeah.
The other point I wanted to mention, Jeremy yesterday was talking about the 700 million that we pay the French authorities for so-called border security. Now, I wonder who actually negotiates these figures, because 700 million a year, if I'm correct, equates to about £2 million a day. Now, if you took the average wages of one of the gendarmes in French, together with any necessary overhead costs, that can't be costing more than the equivalent of £500 in sterling a day per man. So how many...
Yes, where does that money go? I mean, the money has moved around. I mean, I think over the last few years, if you add it all together, you get to that kind of figure. 2025, 2026, around about 200 million euros is... it's quite interesting. It's on the government's own... This was the government's website, Finn, wasn't it, that published this data. Rather unhelpfully, they publish it in pounds, and then they moved to euros. So in 2014, the investment money sent to France to deal with migration, I didn't even realise they were doing this in 2014, was still £14.7 million. By 2025, 209 million euros, which is what, 175 million pounds or something. Collectively, it's hundreds of millions. Listen, I've got to move, Paul. You've been great. Thank you very much indeed for that. Always good to get some great comments on this, and we have more on the way. Loads of comment coming through. 03444991000 is the number. You can leave a voice note there as well, and if you're messaging, it's 87222. Right now, the time is 2 o'clock. Let's get the latest news headlines.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Afternoon, yeah, welcome back. Coming up on 3 minutes after 2 o'clock, it is the home of Common Sense. We're drilling into those figures. Whenever figures are released in whatever capacity from governments, you have to drill down a little and, take the headlines as you do. But once you peek in a little further, you often find different stories. So, Home Office figures have revealed that the number of asylum seekers being housed temporarily in UK hotels has fallen to the lowest level for 18 months. But if deportations in those areas have not gone up, where are all those people staying now? And if you do deport someone, but then because of the new French agreement have to allow someone to come back in, the numbers become a stalemate. And of course it comes after only yesterday, because the weather was quite nice, it was a little sunny, there was no rain, no wind. 545 migrants crossed the channel in small boats. And news that the UK, of course, is handing out 8,000 quid to France for each channel migrant the French stop. This is if nothing else, this is an incredibly expensive initiative. By any measure, all right? We're talking hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds on an annual basis when you put it all together. More on that. How does the migrant crisis end? How does it end? Where does it end? 0344 499 1000. Also this afternoon, former Health Minister Lord Bethell has admitted that the NHS spending has doubled in 17 years, but has had no impact on the nation's health. We're all still tired and knackered, and we ain't living any longer. What has gone wrong? Surely money is not the only answer, demonstrably so. And Labour has come under fire over its net zero dogma after energy bills failed to fall by as much as Rachel Reeves had promised. What, a broken promise from the frontier of government? Surely not. We'll have a look at that too. 0344 499 1000. That is where you'll find us. You can message 87222. Gary makes this point on boats. If the French really want to stop these migrants from coming across the channel, then Macron could do it in a heartbeat just by declaring that anyone who crosses illegally from France will be accepted back on the next ferry, no questions asked. The boats would stop coming virtually overnight, because what would be the point in still trying to get here if you knew you'll be sent straight back? But he won't do that, so we should just accept that Macron is more of a partner to the people traffickers than he is to us and move on. The truth is that we are on our own on this one, so the way to deal with it is to make life in the UK hell for illegal migrants. Firstly, we withdraw from every single international agreement that protects the rights of illegal migrants, and then pass a law that says that the human rights of those illegal migrants are what we say they are. Then we lock them all up. Detention centres, no access to mobile phones, no access to lawyers, no Game Boys, TVs, pool tables, I think I should say, and tell them that they stay in that camp until they agree to either return home or find another country to take them. Who's going to come here illegally if they know that that is what awaits them? Problem solved, says Gary, and when you put it like that, it would solve the problem. Would that not have been an easier agreement with Macron if they're getting £8,000 for every migrant that they stop? And according to their data, according to the data that we have, the French blocked 22,476 attempts in 2025. 41,000 still made it to the UK. You get £8,000 for every one. If you're going to be sent back, if we still gave the French 8,000 quid or maybe 6,000, we could reduce it a little bit. Surely that would stop people. Are we missing something here? Is that not quite logical, quite easy to get your head around? Macron just says, yep, that's fine. As soon as anybody crosses and arrives in the UK, we will accept them back within the hour. Problem solved, you might think. Let's move to this health story. Former Health Minister Lord Bethell talking about the amount of money spent on the NHS, which has doubled in 17 years. Was 100 billion back then. Now it's 200 billion. Now you might go, wow, that's a lot of money. Come on, let's see the booty. What's the evidence? What has it done for the nation's health? Well, Apparently very little. We're certainly not living any longer. In a moment, we'll speak to Dr. Tony O'Sullivan, co-chair of Keep Our NHS Public. First, Steve Brine, former Conservative Health Minister, co-host with Lord Bethell of the Prevention is the New Cure podcast. Good afternoon to you, Steve. Nice to have you with us. Of course, we've heard government say this, health ministers, people like yourself, West Streeting went quite big on it. Early doors of this government saying, you know, prevention is absolutely key. We all know this, don't we? We're all aware of it. We've never had more exercise and dietary advice than any time in the human journey than we have now. And yet, for some reason, we're still flaking out at the age of 29, if you're 79, if you're a bloke. We're still all a bit scabby and knackered. Nothing's changed. What's gone wrong?
Well, for a
That's
start,
not a medical term, by the way, Steve.
No, beautiful, Dr. Collins, very well done.
Indeed.
Just for the record, lest you try and contrast me with your next guest, I want to keep the NHS public too, and so do the vast majority of the British public.
Fair point.
There are fringes that don't want to. Look, I mean, what this story is about is really outcomes. So it's not that we haven't put an awful lot more money in, and of course, the people who work in the NHS deserve to be paid properly. It's that we put all this money in and it's all about the inputs. We haven't seen the outputs. And I think what my podcast co-host is saying, we were discussing yesterday on the show, is that the outputs, if you look at, access to primary care, for instance, story just this week from the Health Foundation saying that half the public avoid contacting their GP about health concern, primarily because they don't think they're going to get a positive response or anything like a timely response. Emergency departments, which is the big story, that isn't actually, it's a dog that doesn't often actually bark, to be honest. Go to an ED, you'll probably spend 6 or 7 hours minimum in there. So that access, that output isn't working very well. The elective waiting lists, they are coming down, and the government trumpet that as one of their great achievements. Why are they coming down? Well, because they've cleaned the data. It's a con. The cancer targets that I wrote when I wrote the last cancer plan, the government recommitted to in the cancer plan earlier this month, they're incredibly tough. We haven't met the cancer targets now for years. And so the money going in, if you keep doing the same thing and keep getting the same outcome, you can see why people like James Bethell say that we're not getting the return on that. Now, you mentioned life expectancy. Yes, the ONS figures just this week said that life expectancy for men 60 years, for women 61.3 years, lowest since records began. This is a Labour government. You know, if I was if I was in Labour Downing Street or as a Labour MP, I think this would sit very, very uncomfortably with me, because if there's one, people often say, what is this government for? What does it stand for? What's its mission? Well, surely it's got to be to narrow that inequality gap. It's not doing so. So look, what do we do about it? Well, I don't think the readers of the Telegraph, who of course splashed this on their front page this morning as the story, I don't think they might like some of the answers, which I and James would have, is that I believe, and many of your viewers may not agree with me, I believe that we need to intervene more as a state, because the state is ultimately the insurer. It's literally called national insurance. And the way that private health insurance works is the insurer intervenes in your life as a customer to make sure that you don't draw on your premium. The state should work the same way in keeping the NHS public. We should be intervening to help people lead healthier lives. We don't do so. It's taken years for us to get a watershed ban on healthy food advertising. And people will say on the right, oh, we shouldn't be doing that. We should let people make those same decisions. Yeah, sure. If you live in the States where you have 100%, privately funded health system, sure, let people do that. Whether it's just and socially justice, I would question. But in the publicly funded health system, I would argue that you have a right and indeed a responsibility to intervene in people's lives.
But we do have, I guess, because we have a sort of messianic kind of love affair with the NHS, and certainly, older generations. My mum would have been a classic example of somebody who she wouldn't. I don't think she ever correlated. She was reasonably healthy until her final years. She had breast cancer and all the rest of it. But she didn't really correlate lifestyle with health. She was of that generation. You had food not because you enjoyed it, you had food to keep you alive, and if you went to the doctors, you just did what the doctor said, and it was that kind of thinking, that very sort of route one older generation thinking, which I think still prevails in lots of respects. People don't have a relationship with their own responsibility.
No, they don't. And while I'm saying, I think the state has a bigger role to play in intervening in public health interventions across the board, we also have a wider public responsibility to the state as ourselves with individual responsibility. There's a missing factor in this. The reason why this is not my dining room that you can see behind me. I'm at a hotel in Gloucestershire because I'm speaking at a big conference today around workplace health. And so in a system constrained by many factors, responsibility doesn't disappear, it shifts. And employers often have first sight of so many health problems, whether they be mental health problems, anxiety-driven problems, musculoskeletal, and they often see them first. The NHS only sees them when they present. So the government brought out the Charlie Mayfield report last year, which is saying all the right things about workforce health, but they're not bringing it together in a health mission. In opposition, Wes Streeting, who I see there on your screen, talked really coherently, and I have a lot of time for Wes, he talked really coherently about the health mission of the government that he hopes to be part of, which is to see the Department of Health as a department of economic growth. And all departments should be part of making us healthier as a nation. They've really moved away from that, I think, since they've come into government. They produced a 10-year plan which barely mentioned the health mission. And I think there are many, many other factors that need to come together in making us healthier as a country. Primarily, why do we talk about poor productivity in this country all the time? Because there are many, many people who are not fit to work. And there are many people who are at work. Look around your office there at Talk Today. There are people who are at work today who are present but are possibly not feeling well, who are worried about waiting for diagnostic results because they're on the waiting list, and they're therefore not performing at the level that they would like to and their employers would like them to. That is a part of this solution that we totally overlook as a state at the moment.
No, I get that. And I wonder how other sort of similar-sized economies fare on this. We're always told that the French and the Germans and the Spanish, they do much better outcomes, cancer, heart disease, those kind of key areas. I know the French have a very... Just to go back to that relationship we have with the NHS, the French sort of look at their health service as we look at a transport service. They expect it to work. They want it to work. Yes, they'll say thank you if you make them better, but it's meant to work for them. They don't sort of look at it as a religion. And some people do claim, rightly or wrongly, that is part of the problem.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The hero worshipping that goes on. Lots of people said, protect the NHS. Well, and the NHS is there to protect us. And if we put it on a pedestal, then we don't do it any favors. We should be. And we try to be this on the podcast. We try to be positive, so try to be constructive about what we think, where we think the NHS gets wrong. And the maternity story, which I know you wanted to touch on, which is everywhere today. It's an absolute disaster for confidence in the health service. And the Secretary of State has said, he's committed to implement the recommendations. Really, because when I was chair of the Select Committee, my last job in Parliament before I retired in 2024, we looked at a lot of these public inquiries that happen, and they make all these recommendations, and every Secretary of State and every health minister says we're going to implement them, and I've been guilty of it myself. And then you know what happens? The regime moves on, the recommendations get forgotten, and then another public inquiry comes out and makes the same recommendations. There's something about the state that isn't working.
Yeah.
And frankly, as my old football coach used to say at school, just play better. I really just honestly think we actually just need to be better doing we know the answers to many of these things. Whether the public want to follow us there because they believe that it's the nanny state and it's my right to drink myself to death. Well, you know what? In a publicly funded health system, no, it's not.
Yeah. On that point, it's a fair point to finish on. Steve, great to have you on with us. We'll speak again, I hope. Steve Bryan, really good stuff from him, former Conservative Health Minister, co-host with Lord Bethell, who we allude to in this story, of the Prevention is the New Cure podcast. Let's speak with Dr. Tony O'Sullivan, co-chair of Keep Our NHS Public. Afternoon to you, Tony. I mean, you've heard all the arguments. I'm sure you've heard ministers like Steve speak on this before. I thought quite a lot of what he said was probably true, even if it was... unfortunate that this is the kind of way our system works. His last point of recommendations come and recommendations go. New governments enter the fray. They get rid of one quango. They say we've got too many quangos, but they just start another one with their own sort of like-minded friends in it. They come to similar conclusions. They spend similar money. But outcomes aren't significantly changing. What is your response to this overarching, rather disturbing headline?
Well,
First of all, I would say that we absolutely need value for money. If we're using public money, it should be spent very wisely. But when we're talking about what's happening, we need the evidence behind it and not just sort of conjecture or not just ideology. And the NHS has always given us value for money, especially when it was funded to allow itself to meet the needs of the population. And up to 2010 and even up to 2015, it was rated the most cost-effective and most universally accessible health service for a major population in the world. So,
on what basis, just out of interest, it was most successful, did you say?
Yes, I mean not in every department, but the Commonwealth Fund in America compares mainly the Western economies over every 2 or 3 years, and up to 2015, it always rated the NHS as number one. It rated it on the levels of value for money. It rated it on the levels of safety and on sort of the availability of the services to the general population. And
but not on outcomes.
Well, outcomes are very difficult because a lot of outcomes are related to poverty and other issues, including education, housing, child poverty, and so on. So it actually performed overall as the best service in the world, putting all those parameters together. I would say that the headline from the Telegraph about the budgets of the NHS doubling in the last 17 years is somewhat dishonest, really, Ian, because if you take the average inflation, and I've checked this today, that is between 3% and 4% for all of those 17 years. And if you add those together, and of course, inflation is a compound interest, if you like. Yeah. 65% of that doubling of funding goes down to keeping pace with inflation and keeping pace with rising wages.
I understand that, but go on, Tony.
Sorry. And then on top of that, you have the rising population, which is very significant, as I'm sure you've covered a lot. There's the rising complexity of need. There's an almost epidemic of ill health in terms of long COVID, in terms of mental health, and also in terms of the rising complexity of conditions. You know, as we are an increasingly aging population, which is a good thing. A high proportion of people have 2, 3, or 4 long-term conditions.
Sure.
But I would say that in the, you know, Stephen, I thought made a lot of interesting points, which would have been good to discuss with him, and I'm glad that he believes in a publicly funded NHS. But he's just been in government for 14 years, and the decade of 2010 to 2019, the major think tanks that we look to for information on the NHS concluded that the NHS was 18% underfunded compared to the EU average. Now, over time, that underfunding has created the inefficiency that we are now commenting on. So it creates, for example, £16 billion backlog in the building of estates, the lack of repair of crumbling wards, and the lack of modern equipment to meet the needs. The waiting lists have built up with almost a decade of between 100 and 140,000 vacancies unfilled in the NHS, and those waiting lists mean that people deteriorate or die on those waiting lists, and when they do get treatment, the treatment is more expensive. As Stephen alluded to, there's nearly 3 million people out of work because of ill health, and that's grown nearly 1 million since COVID. And the lack of efficiency in the system, I would say, if we're looking for solutions, it starts with the lack of social care provision. 13,000 patients on average are in hospital ready for discharge but nowhere to go because of the lack of the lack of social care, residential or rehabilitation beds.
Yeah.
And there's something to say about that. If there's time for some solutions, it would be good to go to go into that, but because of that backlog of people waiting for an admission to a hospital bed to begin their urgent treatment, 16,600 people have died avoidable deaths in 2024, and that was the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, down to delay in treatment. And that, for me, that should be the priority.
Indeed, yeah, and certainly social care. It would be lovely to explore this more, and we will speak again, Tony, because I know there's a lot more to be said on it, and you speak with a qualified voice. I thank you for joining us today, Dr. Tony O'Sullivan. He is co-chair of Keep Our NHS Public. We could have continued and gone on for another 15 minutes on the comparison charts. So in France, for example, where they pay a similar amount in, as I understand it, as do most EU countries, fairly similar. They've got different ways of funding it, whether it's an insurance-based system. Germany differ a bit from France. Spain differ again. I'm assuming they also have people living longer in all of those countries. I'm assuming things like long COVID that he referred to there is just as much of a problem in those countries as well. And I'm assuming social care is somewhat of an issue, maybe for different reasons, but they do have better outcomes on things like cancer and heart disease and heart-based medical problems. So what would be the reason for that? What are they doing that we're not doing? 0344 499 1000. We'll take some calls on that as well. Our original question, how does the migration crisis end? We'll continue with your comments too. More from you coming up next on Talk.
Breaking news in the last couple of moments. Extraordinary news. The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is.
Mr. Mandarin, how long do you think that you can stay on the island?
We're going to stay forever. Our rights have to be respected now. We're going to stay.
Do you expect Jeremy Clarkson to become a part of your new party?
I can tell you, if Jeremy Clarkson decided to darken my doorstep, I would be absolutely delighted.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
John says, this is on, John's in Bury, this is reference migration. He says, Ian, I think realistically to end the boat crisis is to be tough, turn them back. If it means a standoff with France, Europe, etc., let's do it. End of the day. We are Brits, we are leaders, not wet wipes. That's after we've left the human rights legislation and still continues, says John. Yeah, I think there is the overarching sense, certainly coming from most of our people getting in touch today, is it's got to be somebody who wants to stop it. Lenny made that point at the beginning. You've got to want to stop it. Matt in Staffordshire, who says the crisis ends easily. Pick up illegals as usual. Take them straight back to France, to the beach. Let them go there. Fall out with Macron. Big deal. The problem would be stopped within a week. France then do the same to their EU neighbours, and the effect would cascade backwards very quickly. That might just work. You know, sometimes the kind of obvious answer is that, what's the phrase for that? It's gone. It's left me momentarily. The obvious solution is often the one, and people spend ages like scrambling around looking for some sort of complex answer as to how you put stuff right. And invariably, there are easier ways to do it, and you sometimes just have to look for it. Occam's razor, that's the phrase I was looking for. John's in Wiltshire on health and the NHS. John, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. It's not John, it's Jason.
Jason, I apologise. No, it says Jason. That was my fuzzy head doing something or other.
It's Jason. But anyway, thank you for taking the call, Ian. It was a couple of things, actually. One, I don't know if you want to call him your guest speaker. I heard him earlier. He was talking about the processed foods and how the economy is and how people got results of that. Well, I think that's utter bull tosh. How much processed food actually costs, and what you can go and buy yourself fresh veg. You can make spaghetti bolognese, the sauces and stuff from scratch with tomatoes. It's not to do with the economy or how things are. It's because people are lazy or they do not know how to cook.
Well, also, is it
making stuff from scratch?
Just to pick up, you're absolutely bang on. Just to pick up on that point, Jason, if governments were really serious, wouldn't they just ban all processed food?
Yes, you probably would, but then if they're making money on it, the sugar tax, and they're making
all of that. I mean, have people stopped drinking Coca-Cola since McDonald's and others lobbed a sugar tax on it? I doubt it.
Nope, and the government sat sort of raking it all in, which then leads me on to the government with old Mr. Street and how he's so shocked with all this extra money it's going into the NHS and not going anywhere. If you look how much is actually wasted, it's hemorrhaged on rubbish. What they actually do is you've got all these middle line managers, you've got all these other top managers, keep giving all these pay rises out. It's even things like with the ambulance service, which is part of the NHS. I'm in the motor trade, so I'm a mechanic. The NHS have got a lovely brand new fleet of Fiat ambulances, constantly breaking, but they do all their own warranty work on them. So they've bought these vehicles and then they're spending God knows how much at a time to fix them when it's under a manufacturer's warranty and it could go to a dealership to be fixed for free.
Yeah.
But they've gone for some cheap. They've gone for some cheap rubbish, and there's nowhere really around that fixes them.
That's genius, isn't it?
My local ambulance, Southwest Ambulance, so they run these Fiats. The nearest place they can take it to be fixed is Reading.
Reading?
Now, Reading. So from Chippenham to Reading, you do the maths how far away that is. That's not really, is it?
It's not down the road. It's not practical. They haven't thought it through.
No, also we got the treatments. I mean, there's things that need to be done to people, important treatments. They don't do it, but what they will do, they let old Derek go and have his balls chopped off and come up as Debbie, and they pay for that. It's not a problem. The priorities are all in place.
And you would have thought you know, by now, isn't there a whole department of government called, I don't know, you know, the Department of Common Sense or something of that nature, where you simply look at these stories and if it doesn't pass it's not even the sniff test, it's just the common sense test. It doesn't pass that, you just say, you're out of your mind. Sorry, we're not going to get a fleet of ambulances that have to travel 100 miles in order to get their tyre fixed. I mean, that's a nonsense. If somebody wants to transition, you know, we will have understanding with their plight, and we don't want to be nasty to anyone, but it's never going to usurp any other patient that's got something more serious. This is all logical stuff. Jason, you make some great points. Thank you. Jason in Wiltshire. By the way, the UK government generated about £327 million in revenue from soft drinks. That's the levy, the sugar tax, in the year 2024-2025. So 327 million a year there, mate. Isn't it funny when they just introduce something? You think, where did that money specifically go? And if you're really serious, go into a super... I mean, it sounds very statist, doesn't it? Because there is, as I think Steve, our former health minister guest, said, you know, the idea that you ban certain foods, you can't have that, you can't buy a Fray Bentos pie because it's got a sell-by date on it that's 10 years away and probably got a little bit of stuff in there to keep it going for that period of time. Anything processed, some of those frozen shepherd's pies and curries and God knows what, you know, they're okay, they're a bit tasty, the microwave stuff. Ban the lot, just ban everything. Ban everything. And then watch the nation's health change. But that will never happen. Now, I don't like banning stuff. I don't like the state intervening. But as Steve said, the former health minister, we are also paying for the NHS. So, you know, if we were in America where it was all private, you can make that calculation yourself because you're paying for it in a much more direct fashion than you are with our own health service. 0344 499 1000. More of your calls on the way. Coming next on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Susie says, for your information, your guests' misinformation. Oh, there's always the debate about long COVID. And I think it does sort of slightly divide the room, and there are some headlines that Susie has enclosed on the tweet to question and also highlight that some medical experts question the issue of long COVID. From what I can gather, long COVID, I may be wrong on this as well as the many other things I'm often wrong about. Long COVID is a condition where the name keeps changing. So if you'd had a terrible bout of influenza a decade ago and, you know, horrendous respiratory issues and all that goes with it, you could possibly find yourself on a 10-year journey where your health never fully recovered. Just wasn't called long COVID then, but the same manifestation of problems applied. Now referred to as long COVID, essentially a chronic illness, chronic in the sense that it's ongoing, that happens after you've had another illness. I think it's just been given the kind of throwaway remark, long COVID, as if you've still got COVID all the time. So quite right to point that out. Susie, thank you. And this from Keith, who says, all one needs to look at to show the NHS waste of money is their response to Boris adding 2% national insurance to fund NHS shortly after they announced a series of vacancies for DEI positions at exorbitant salaries. Yeah. This is, again, the Department of Common Sense that we need to address this stuff. What about this as well? Talking of common sense, or lack of, Labour coming under fire after its net zero dogma issues after energy bills failed to fall by as much as we'd been promised by the Chancellor. I mean, we've had all sorts of figures wheeled out. Remember the 300 quid we're going to save you every year? Matt Ridley is a former Conservative MP, peer and writer. Good afternoon to you, Matt. Nice to have you with us. I mean, it is extraordinary, isn't it? We all remember back at the last election this figure of £300 that was being thrown around, and then one day it just disappeared. They were all told, don't mention the 300 quid because it's not there. Now we've got this apparent reduction in our bills, which Mr Miliband and others are celebrating. But of course there's a little bit of fiddling and crafty accountancy going on even with that.
Yes, so they promised they'd bring down energy bills by 300 quid each. But energy bills have gone up during that period when they said they would do that. Now they've transferred some of the cost away from your electricity bill and onto your general taxation, where it's harder to spot. So that's not a reduction. That's just a switch. And even so, the electricity price cap is still £73 above what it was before they came to power. So the electricity is not getting cheaper. We have the most expensive electricity in the world for industrial users and the second most expensive for domestic users. This is a crippling problem for our economy, and shifting some of the cost from one kind of payer to another, from the bill payer to the taxpayer, is not going to solve the problem.
No, indeed, and it doesn't take, you know, a sixth former could have sat down just with a bit of cursory research and a Google page and realised that actually the bulk of that saving has just been shifted to other forms of taxation, and so, you know, really no great giveaway from Mr Miliband. There is still the irredeemable reality of high bills, which are not mirrored in other similar-sized economies. What are they all doing, Matt, that we're not doing?
Well, I'm afraid they're not subsidising solar and wind to the same extent. That's the problem, because they're trying to blame it on gas, but the gas prices come way down since 2022, and the electricity prices kept on going up. What are we doing? We're spending way more on particularly subsidies for offshore wind, which is about the most expensive way and inefficient way you can think of to make electricity, because not only is it unreliable, you don't know whether the wind's going to blow on a particular day, but it's a long way out in the North Sea. You've got to build the cables, you've got to bring it across land, you've got to bring it to people's homes, and you need backup from gas. So it's bound to be more expensive, however you cut it. And we've just recently had an auction of offshore wind, which has jacked the price up even more. So they're locking in for 20-year contracts, high electricity prices, just at the time when we need to get data centers and AI going in this country and a whole lot of other industries, including manufacturing. And it's not going to happen with these electricity prices.
Indeed. Look, I know it's a national sport to have a pop at a politician, and Ed Miliband is the gift that keeps on giving in that respect. And, you know, satirising and caricaturing those in power is, a good democratic. It should be taught in schools, frankly. You know, it's a good thing to hold our political masters to account and sometimes have some fun with them. But Mr Miliband does seem to be a man with a sort of PhD in ineptitude. I mean, I've rarely seen anyone so evangelically wedded to a brief as this man is. I mean, there appears to be little or no wiggle room beyond his almost one-dimensional focus on this idea of wind farms and solar panels and all that goes with electric cars, you name it. I mean, it's become, it looks a little bit... it looks a bit unstable, frankly, to watch a Minister of State carry out his duties in this way. It's almost as if Starmer's left him alone. Go on, you get on with it, Ed. Do whatever you need. Here's loads of money.
Well, it's the immunity to reason that I find so hard to understand. When we show quite clearly that the costs are higher of doing it the way he's doing it, and lower if we were to produce our own gas and things like that. He comes out with statements that are just simply untrue, like that, that we'd pay a global price for gas. There is no global price for gas. If we produced it at home, it would be a lot cheaper, as well as having a lower carbon footprint. So one can make these arguments, but it's like trying to make arguments to my dog. It doesn't respond in a sort of rational way. It just ignores them. And that is very odd. We're supposed to be allowed to debate these issues, not simply have slogans thrown back at us by government ministers.
Yeah, I do wonder whether this, or some of this, comes down to largely a separate subject, but it does sort of feed into it. It's often, this government are often criticised because there's not any real business experience on the front bench, and, there's a few lawyers thrown into the equation, but very little of evidence of anyone that's ever run anything of any significance. You come from a business background. You've had a significant business career with some, big corporations and companies. That's kind of lacking, isn't it? I often wonder, in the absence of any other explanation for this kind of madness that seems to be threading its way around Ed Miliband's desk on a daily basis, or his head. Is it that? I mean, if he'd worked a little bit somewhere, would that might have helped? If he'd seen what a ledger book looks like and a budget, and was compelled to adhere to common sense and responsibility, do you think that would have helped him along the way?
Well, I think part of the problem is they're listening to big business, not small business. And worse, they're listening to the business that produces electricity, not the businesses that consume electricity. And I think that's the critical mistake, because if you talk to the companies that build wind farms and solar farms, of course they're going to say, give us more subsidies. But if you talk to the businesses that are actually going to use the electricity to try and, make food or manufacture cars or do AI in data centers, you would get a very different reaction. And that's what I'm not seeing, is an ability to, on the part of the government, to represent the interests of the consumer, the small business, rather than the big producers of electricity.
Indeed. Matt, while you're with us, I just want to ask you something about the Spectator's alternative COVID inquiry last night, which sounds like a cracking event, better than the BAFTAs, and no racism as well, which is great. This, of course, was to have a little look at, perhaps what should have been done and what needed to happen, and to ask some pretty prominent questions. Just tell us a little bit about that, because I know you posed some fundamentals on this.
Well, we had a great panel. We had Jonathan Sumption, the former Supreme Court judge. We had Sunetra Gupta, the wonderful epidemiologist from Oxford, Christopher Snowdon from the Institute of Economic Affairs, and Tom Whipple from the Times. And we had some disagreements. But I think we torpedoed the idea, which has become dominant in the current COVID inquiry, the extremely expensive and long-winded COVID inquiry, that the only question they really have to ask is why we didn't lock down sooner, longer, and more often. That clearly is nonsense. Sunetra Gupta is one of the world's leading epidemiologists, and she thinks that lockdowns were a mistake altogether. Yep. Others think that they may have been necessary, but shorter, and etc. I think we need to question modelling. Why was modelling allowed to be so dominant when it turned out to be worse than looking at the entrails of chickens in terms of telling us what was going to happen next? We were told, there would be between 600 and 6,000 deaths a day in January 22 because of Omicron. There were never more than 200 deaths a day, so below the bottom of the range. Yeah. So why wasn't the formal inquiry putting modelers on the spot and saying, you let us down? And that's one of the issues that I raised last night.
Every time I try to make sense, and I to my shame, despite doing what I do for a living, I'd forgotten about the official COVID inquiry. It seems to have been rolling on, and I'm sure there's another couple of years left in it yet. You know how these things tend to work. But was it just back to that word ineptitude again? You listen to Dominic Cummings when he speaks about it. Now, not everybody looks at Mr. Cummings as a reliable witness, but his memoirs, if you like, of the time in Downing Street and headless chickens running around, nobody quite knowing what to do. This curious SAGE committee that were, there's a lot of credence put onto them, and that was all rather confusing. And, communists sitting on the panel and goodness knows what. And different experts coming in, telling Boris Johnson one thing, somebody telling him another. Does it ultimately just boil down to the fact that nobody really knew what to do?
Yes, I think inevitably, of course, we were acting under uncertainty and we didn't know what to do, but there was overconfidence in telling us what to do. That was the problem with the modelers. Before the pandemic, there was quite a debate, actually, between real epidemiologists and mathematical modelers. And the epidemiologists were saying it doesn't work to make precise prognostications of how interventions are going to help. And I think the problem with the inquiry is that you've got a barrister and a judge talking to each other, neither of whom have a blind bit of interest in biology or mathematics, frankly, and they don't really want to talk about that kind of thing. They want to talk about whose message to who on which day couldn't have been sent. You know, they're just after the gossip, frankly, as far as
I was about to,
that's the least interesting part.
Yeah, Matt Hancock's WhatsApp messages. I mean, goodness me, imagine having to trawl through that on a daily basis. It's enough to finish one off. Listen, Matt, great to have you with us as ever. We will speak again. Matt Ridley is a former Conservative peer and writer, science background, business background. I mean, he's right across so many areas. And there we are on Ed Miliband, and latterly a bit of COVID thrown in as well. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK. on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. 0344 499 1000. Lots going on. This from Helen in Devon says, I think this is back to the immigration question. The thing I don't understand about the French is that if they stop the boats, the migrants would stop coming to France. Yes. Which would go some way to solving their migration problem too. The French have got such a massive problem. I mean, certainly the top coast of the northern coast of France. It's a mess. I mean, there's got thousands of people trying to descend on that area. So it's a problem for the French. I've never understood that either. If you get into Paris and some of the suburbs, it is off the scale. And then, of course, they've got the other issue of accommodating those people who are claiming asylum. You know, they don't get away with it either. They're also paying their 40 quid or 40 euros, I think slightly more than we pay, to people in different setups and circumstances. So the problem is Europe-wide. And Spain, you know, just looking at this amnesty that they're putting into place, just extraordinary. Before we talk to Richard in Liverpool, Voice of Doom, this is day 2. The previous one went on Tuesday. It was Oliver Letwin. That went on for 20 days. It's the mystery voice, but it's a political mystery voice. Very simple. Who is this?
Expertise and knowledge.
Could be left-wing, could be right-wing, dead or alive, young, old, whatever. Here it is again.
Expertise and knowledge.
And again.
Expertise and knowledge.
87222 if you think you know who that is, and if we get a correct answer, we of course reveal things in the next hour. Have another listen.
Expertise and knowledge.
87222. Let's go to Richard in Liverpool. Back to migration. Richard, what have you got for us? Hi.
Hello, I just to correct you there, it's Richard from Coventry.
From Coventry?
Coventry.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know why it says Liverpool there. That comes up automatically, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, well, I'm a Liverpool fan, so maybe that's...
Oh, there you go. Not a Coventry fan?
No, well, that's my second team. Excuse me.
Didn't David Icke used to play for Coventry?
Yes, he did, didn't he?
Yeah. I don't know why I should mention that in this conversation.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Go on. Yeah, about this migrant boat crisis thing.
Yeah, what's happening?
If it's costing us, you know, the equivalent of £2 million a day paying the French
to
stop these guys from coming over, I just don't understand. Where did we find all this money together? Where, you know...
Where does it just come from?
Yeah. It's like it just... I mean, you know, it wasn't so long ago, you know, we had the... Labour always complaining that, you know, the Conservatives left a big black hole. And, you know, they're having to find all these millions to, you know, to compensate. Well, where did we find all this money to keep giving the French?
It's quite... I often wonder about, if you think about the amount of companies involved in facilitating just one hotel, how many invoices have to be sent to the government. You do think, you know, is there a big bank account called, you know, do they have an account at Santander where they just keep lobbing the money and then they pay? How does that work? You're absolutely right. I have no idea. I mean, the money involved is so vast and it goes out daily, like someone's unplugged a sewage system and out it pours. Where does it come from?
It's almost like they just pluck it up, you know, pluck it out the air from...
Yeah, I mean, the money is literally there, but when you consider all the other areas of life that need a few quid...
Yeah, it's just mind-boggling.
It really is mind-boggling. We need to talk to David Icke about this.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he'd come up with a lot of conspiracy theories.
Yeah, well, doubtless he's got a theory on it. I mean, it's always a confusion as to where the physical money comes from, because all those companies, you know, the bloke that owns the hotel at the end of every month or every 2 months, whatever the agreement is, he gets a fat load of cash into his bank, right? Yeah. The people that do the catering, they get a load of cash into their bank, and the person that works on the reception and the security guys, they get paid as well. Where does it all come from? That's just one hotel. Where does it come from? It's a great question. Richard, thank you. I've got to move on, only for time. Want to get more voices in. Matthew's in Warrington. Matthew, what have you got for us?
Hiya, mate. You all right?
Yeah, good.
This 130 quid reduction in energy bills.
Yeah. What a giveaway.
I can buy my kids an extra Star bar for the cat lunches. 130 quid. 130 quid
Yeah.
over 12 months.
Yep.
Is what? Is it £11.25 a month? But it doesn't mention that they've not raised our threshold on our taxes.
Yeah, but also 90 quid of that money is going into general taxes. So
exactly,
you're still going to pay it.
Yeah, and he was jumping up and down like he'd won the lottery yesterday at P&Qs. You're like, come on, mate, are you for real? Do you really think that's going to make me like suddenly reinvest all my money into this government because I've saved 70 quid on my gas bill, gas and electric?
Yeah, which you haven't really saved anyway. So
no, he's not mentioned that our council taxes have gone up. He's not mentioned that everything goes up every year, but we're getting less and less for it. I don't know how he can stand. They're allowed to stand at P&Qs and just lie and talk utter drivel. He never answers anything. He never says anything straight. He can't even lie straight in bed. It's just Ian.
Yeah, but you have to remember one thing, Matthew. These people like Ed Miliband, and I'm not trying to be smart or mischievous, they genuinely believe they know stuff we don't know. He thinks he's saving the planet. He literally's convinced himself that's what he's doing.
He is a bubbling... He should be in something like Dad's Army. He's absolute balloon of a man. They all are. It winds me up because they're not doing anything. Labour meant to be for the working class people, and they're not. They're not doing anything. Since he's got in the last 18 months, they have completely foobarred this country. And I dread to think in 3 years' time where we're going to... He's giving Gibraltar away. He's giving islands away. He'll mostly give his wife and kids away if he thinks he'll get in the pocket of China. He's an absolute imbecile.
Well, yeah, you mentioned Gibraltar there, and of course that's now in the headlines in the last few hours after that new agreement for Spain to check the arrivals. British travellers to Gibraltar have got to show their passports to Spanish border guards. This is under a deal with the EU. So does that lead to something else is the supposition. Listen, Matthew, you've been brilliant. Great callers on all of this. I love the nuanced angles as well. I think our last call that was making that point about where the money comes from. I mean, it's very easy to say that as a throwaway. Yeah, where do they get all the money from? And then you move on. When you stop and go, no, seriously, where do they get all the money? Where does it come from? So much money going out. That's just in the migration story. Pete's in Desborough, says, afternoon, Ian, surely it can be solved, channel migration, without affecting human rights. If we pay France their fee monthly, but for each migrant who does cross, we reduce 8,000 quid per head. Is that me being thick? Failing that, offer the French police a personal bonus. I mean, we know when the boats are coming. Says, but it's a good point. Yeah. Get a special bonus if you stop it. In addition to, the money, the telephone number figures. There's another area, not just the hotels, the amount we're paying the French. Millions of pounds. We've got the Voice of Doom coming up. Have we got a winner to this voice?
Expertise and knowledge.
87222 if you think you know. Here's the news at 3.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Afternoon and welcome back. We are exploring a multitude of areas of this dizzy place called the United Kingdom, where strange things go on courtesy of our own government. In particular, those Home Office figures that have revealed the number of asylum seekers being housed temporarily in UK hotels has actually fallen to its lowest level for 18 months. Hurrah! You go, well, that's fantastic, isn't it? No, but the people haven't been deported. So where have they gone? They live somewhere else now. That would suggest HMOs, or maybe down your road, round the corner, wherever. You've got to live somewhere, all right? So they've moved these people and then claim, we're reducing the amount of hotels. This is a nonsense. Of course, it comes on the back of the shocking statistic that here we are just 6 weeks into February, 6 weeks into 2026. It's only February. Still technically winter, and yet 545 migrants crossed the channel in small boats yesterday. And by the way, to top it all, we're paying 8,000 quid to France per migrant for each person they stop. This is Looney Tunes territory. How does this migrant crisis end? More from you on that. Also, as you've been hearing, former Health Minister Lord Bethell has admitted that NHS spending has doubled in 17 years. I know there's an inflationary component to consider, but no discernible impact on the nation's health. Why are we spending more and getting less? What has gone terribly wrong? And Labour under fire, as you've been hearing, over their net zero dogma. They promised a big fall in energy bills. Rachel Reeves said it's going to be this much. Ed Miliband said it's going to be that much. Turns out it's, well, hardly anything at all, frankly, when you crunch down what they've actually done. Details to come. More comment from you. 0344 499 1000. Anne says, my husband is a hospital consultant. He saw a patient who has no right to access free NHS treatment in his clinic. The patient had not paid the bill for previous non-emergency treatment. The wait time is 18 months for a routine appointment in his specialist area. Yet here we are treating people who have no right to access the system. And Ange, thank you for that. I fear that story is far more common than anyone is bothering to tell us about. And that's just one example from one clinician, clearly very senior in his role, who spotted that happening there. All over the place, I reckon that's going on. The bill for that, again, where does the money come from, would be huge. Now, let's go back to the BAFTAs. Tourette sufferer John Davidson has blasted the BBC for failing to edit out his involuntary racial slur at the BAFTAs at the weekend. The BBC has admitted that not cutting out the involuntary slur was a serious mistake, and they've now launched an investigation. They love an investigation, don't they, over there at the BBC? Let's get a word from Rebecca Ryan, campaign director of Defund the BBC. Rebecca, it's kind of hard to keep up which investigation, because they've got the Glastonbury investigation, the Panorama investigation. All of these revolve around the issue of editing, which is interesting. You know, quite a simple process. It's been around for a long time. I think, you know, when Matey was running the BBC, Lord Reith, back in the day, they knew how to edit stuff. Apparently it's eluded them now, and here they are in another load of trouble.
Absolutely. It doesn't need an investigation, does it, really? I mean, we give them 3.7 billion a year, and they come up with this excuse that they couldn't edit it out because they were in a truck. So it's like, well, you can afford the best equipment that there is. And also you have people in the auditorium who could have told you, you know, when this happened. You know, it's an outrage that John Davidson's been hung out to dry in this.
Yeah, can I just pick up on that specific point? the in a truck thing, I mean, I don't know whether they think we're stupid. It doesn't matter whether you're in a truck or in a room backstage. The same thing applies. The being in a truck doesn't somehow, it's not got a force field around it that stops common sense going through. They happen to be in a truck because it was filmed in was it the Royal Festival Hall, wherever it was, one of those, places. So they have a broadcast truck, not unusual. So the crew and those that are mixing it and outputting it, as they call it, would be sitting in there. But if they'd been sitting in the room next door, it would have been the same issue.
Absolutely. And so it doesn't need an investigation. It needs people to actually say, well, we've made a huge mistake. Let's not waste licence fee payers' money on this investigation. Look, they knew what the issues were with that evening ahead of time, because they knew ahead who was going to win, or at least at the very least they knew who the nominees were. So they knew the film would, and it's just the complete irony of the fact that this is the film that won and the subject matter, and then we have this whole hoo-ha where this poor guy is being, accused of being racist. It's absolutely diabolical, and he should have been protected by the BBC, but he hasn't been.
No, and it's the BAFTAs is a big awards ceremony. I know it's not quite the Oscars, but it's kind of second. It's shown globally. It's a big deal for the BBC. Those involved in it would have been those at the top of their field, whether they're producers, directors, editors, whoever. Working in a delay is done for a couple of reasons. It makes to broadcasters a lot of sense in case something goes wrong. They can cut it out. Live stuff is always fraught with difficulties, particularly when you've got a lot of lovies on stage who want to impart their political message. They did manage, curiously, to remove Free Palestine from one of the actors. I don't know which one it was that wielded that one. They got rid of that. But they couldn't, despite having a crew that are at the top of their game on site, they couldn't work out that getting rid of the N-word at an awards ceremony, it should have been removed. Now, as you rightly said at the beginning, Rebecca, so they've got this crazy excuse of the outside broadcast truck outside. OK, fine. Is somebody seriously asking us to believe that nobody from the BBC was in the building? Do they all go, right, the BAFTAs are starting, let's all leave? Of course they didn't. There were people there, there were floor managers and researchers, goodness knows who else, making sure they've got everything, talking to each other on their headpieces. Somebody would have gone, they had 2 hours to do this as well. So somebody would have gone, oh, by the way, Jim, did you get rid of, the M-word? Did you get rid of... It's not hard to understand what should have happened.
Absolutely. And John has said that, there was a microphone left really quite close to him as well, which he's complained, why was it left near me? So it seems to be sort of a catalogue of failures, one thing after another, where he has then, had these... and it's deeply embarrassing for the black people that were presenting on the stage, and also for, across the world as well. But at the same time, there's a complete lack of understanding about Tourette syndrome and about what causes the most extreme thing that can be said in that situation. That's the point of it. So for people like Jamie Foxx to turn around and say, well, clearly, we're not believing that he's just come, that it's accident. It's a misunderstanding of the syndrome, and it's all the BBC's fault that this has come to pass.
Yeah, and it wasn't really helped because Alan Cumming, who is, a very skilled and talented man who was hosting it, was then obviously given a script to sort of give an apology, but it wasn't really an apology because, if you were offended, well, when someone's wheeled out a word like that, I think the if you were offended bit is a slightly redundant and a bit inadequate in that context. So there was that going on. One of the curious things I did hear, though, Rebecca, on a different phone-in station that I happened to be listening to while cooking me chops the other night was... somebody said this just shows how right-wing the BBC is because they cut out the Palestine thing and encouraged the N-word. And I thought, really? That's a fascinating turn of events when the BBC are being called too right-wing.
I think there's absolutely no way in the world that the BBC actually chose to leave the word in. It's not as if, that this is a decision on their part. That would be completely outrageous, but it's obviously not the case. This is just professional negligence. And like you say, this is a huge event every year in the UK and globally, and the BBC should have been absolutely at the top of its game. You know, we're forced to pay for the BBC if we watch any live broadcast TV at all, and this is hugely embarrassing. You know, and yeah, for them to just throw their hands in the air and say, well, we were working from a truck, it's just...
I mean, that is just the craziest excuse ever. But there is another theory on this, Rebecca, and that is that the BBC... Because in the 2 hours they've got to get it out... And by the way, you know, it's... the use of the M-word is about half a second. So they wouldn't have had to do much editing. They'd just have had to dip the audience audio feed for that moment, and it would have been gone. It wouldn't have affected the speakers, who did a brilliant job of kind of moving on and ignoring it as best they could, despite how shocking it must have felt up there, because I doubt whether they had time to go, oh, it's the Tourette's guy that did, you know, they just heard the N-word being shouted at them as two black guys jump on the stage. One of the theories is that the BBC, in a classic example of being sort of, I don't even know if the word is woke, but sort of oversensitive to Tourette's, somebody thought it would be a terrible thing to remove someone's tick from a broadcast, even if it's John and even if it's the M-word. That you can't do that. He's got Tourette's. That's, you know, that's terrible. That's like, you know, not only showing someone's face when they're in a wheelchair so that you don't show the wheels. You know, it's in that ballpark. In the absence of any other logic, is it possible it could be that?
I mean, it would absolutely beg a belief, wouldn't it? But that could explain why they had a microphone so close to him. I mean, or John has said that he actually called Alan Cumming a paedophile as well. So he you know, we're jumping on the race issue, but obviously there's a homophobia there as well. But somehow did that get cut out? You know, we don't know. But he has said that his tick did make that happen. Yeah. But of course, the BBC has a duty of care to this guy who was there to celebrate, you know, this film about his life story, and it's the irony of that. It's gone so badly wrong.
Yeah, well, we'll add it to the list of edit inquiries that are going on over there at the BBC. I mean, the Panorama one, I genuinely can't wait for what. I don't even know if they're ever going to tell us what happened there, because there could be no excuse or reason on that one. Listen, great to have you on, Rebecca, as always. Thank you for your time. Rebecca Ryan is Campaign Director at Defund the BBC. It was an extraordinary moment, and if you saw it, I saw the apology, because I don't really watch awards things. I find them quite painful. And I'm a little bit interested in hearing what films I should have watched in the last year and didn't. So there's a bit of that going on, but it was only afterwards, when obviously it was on social media, and I thought, what? I know it's in delay. How did that not get removed? Paul's in Liverpool on this point. Paul, what have you got for us?
Well, listen, I'm blaming the guy, the Tourette's guy. Because I'll tell you now, Ian, and we know he's got a problem, and therefore that's okay. But I'll guarantee he doesn't go to R&B events with a big community of black people, or big, maybe down to Brixton. I'll guarantee he doesn't go down them places. If he can't help shouting those serious, you know, heavy insults, man. You know what I mean? So,
well, you're saying you think he knew what he was doing?
No, he can't help it. But if you can't help it, you make sure you're not in certain situations. Point is, he doesn't go to those maybe black communities, I'll guarantee it, because he knows I might shout something. So why didn't he decide, okay, this BBC thing could be a load of people, black people, you know, whatever.
But it wouldn't just be, I mean, apparently, apparently he called the host a paedophile, who happens to be a gay man, and, you know, the sort of misplaced, horrendously offensive correlation that some people tried to make there. He was doing that. Apparently, a couple of years ago, Paul, and if you know this, he told the Queen to F off to her face.
See, I'm not having all this, you know, and I'm not. The fact is, if you've got a problem that's that out there and you can't help it, you need to curb your involvement in certain stuff. And I don't care who that offends. Because I'll still say it again, that guy will not walk through Brixton tonight and shout anything. Suddenly he'll be cured.
So, but if he did walk through Brixton, the chances are he would say the same thing.
Well, no, you see, this is the point. He doesn't, because he knows he can't help it. Therefore, I'll avoid a situation because I don't want a problem. Or, even a bit of another step, maybe he can control it when it can be a bit heavy.
Well, it's interesting how those with Tourette's have kind of... There is a division on this, even those with Tourette's. I mean, I saw one girl, she was an Americans don't really seem to... It's a bit weird to say this. They don't seem to know much about Tourette's. You know, when they were talking about it on some of the American channels, they were like, what is this Tourette's thing? You know, who just swears? And, of course, it's not just swearing. It could be tics of all different nature, gesticulating, physical, hitting yourself, shouting, squealing, involuntary noises, all sorts of things. And those with Tourette's who talk about it recognise that it can look quite funny to some people when you see somebody sort of madly ticking. It's almost cartoon-like. It doesn't look real. Really? You can't control that? But, of course, those that understand it say, look, there's a neuron in your brain that fires, and it fires almost like don't press the red button, Paul. You know, don't press that button, so somebody presses it. Because it takes the context and your brain offers the worst possible thing in that context. So you see a gay man, you make a homophobic remark. You see a black man, you make a racial remark. You see a woman looking, you know, I don't know, looking sensual. You throw some sexist remark.
Well, Ian, OK, look, what about this? As that guy, you know, what is he, 30 or 40 or something? So he's been on the planet a long time with this condition.
50,
and he's
54.
Never actually, so are you telling me this was the first time he shouted that N-word in front of black people? Well, if he can't help it, he's done that a million times. Well, I don't think he'd still be standing.
So you don't think he should have, the BBC should have not invited him, knowing that whether it was the N-word or any other slur, because of that? Because that would...
You know, I think he should have uninvited himself. He said if he can insult Satan on the telly, knowing it'll be taken out of context all over the planet, all madness is kicked up over it. By the way, the BBC can't edit it out. I can edit stuff out on my phone. Do you know what I mean? So that's ridiculous.
Well, it's utterly ridiculous.
Guy, all I know is that guy, if he's still walking around shouting the N-word because he can't help it, well, that means he can control it in certain places.
Well, I mean, or can he? Listen, Paul, it's a great... I mean, it really is an interesting debate. And thank you, mate, for calling. Curiously, I said to Finn, our producer, only yesterday, it's weird that we never talked about this on Monday, which was the day, the day right after. But there is a sort of different level of interest in this now, and the nature of Tourette's is kind of interesting as to how it manifests. Did any of you ever see the original BBC documentary called John's Not Mad? This was in 1989. I don't know if I saw it at the time or whether I saw a repeat of it a couple of years later. And I don't remember the whole thing, but I can remember him being in a supermarket as like I guess a teenager or something, essentially just telling random old ladies to off. And I remember, myself as a younger kid, as a kid, really, looking at it going, wow, I don't know if this is the most disturbing thing I've ever seen or the funniest thing I've ever seen, because it does have, rightly or wrongly, that effect when you see somebody doing that. Let's go to Billy, who's on the west coast of Denmark. On this point, Billy, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hi, Ian. How's it going?
Very good. Just don't swear.
Paul talks so much rubbish. Should a blind man keep apologising for bumping into people? It's just, where do you stop the madness about that? That's...
Yeah. You would literally never be able to go out, would you?
Right. And the guy's they can't live his life behind doors. He's, I understand he's on like a medication thing. He's on an electric thing to try.
Yeah, I think he controls it better than he ever has in his life. But I think it's taken him a journey. And I would imagine it's probably wrecked his life in many respects.
Yeah, 100%. Anyway, back to the matter at hand, the immigration.
Yeah.
I would have 2 cruise ships, the amount of money that they're spending, 2 rented cruise ships, scoop them up, be all nice to them, put them in the big room in the cruise ship, the ball hall, and tell them, look, lads, this is a crack here. You're never, ever going to set foot in the UK. We've bought an island in Scotland for £2 million, which is one day's salary to France. We've built a big, massive camp there, and you'll get all the things you need in there, but you will not leave that camp till we get you processed. And it could take 5 years. So what we can do with it, we can take you to an airport now, and we'll
fly you wherever you want to go.
I don't know why that's... when this came up the other day, I think I might have even mentioned it on air, Billy. I don't know why anybody wouldn't come up with that. You don't have to treat somebody badly. You're not going to starve them. You're not going to sleep in a cold tent. You know, you can look after somebody. But that would seem more logical, right?
Well, there's an island for sale in Scotland now for $2.5 million. I can even forward the details to them if they want to go and buy it.
Well, listen, yeah, I might buy it myself if it's cheap enough. I'm looking. Billy, thank you. Great call from Billy. Yeah, the Tourette's thing does sort of divide the room. And John Davidson is now, you know, pretty angry at the BBC for not editing something out, which, by the way, in editing terms, would have been literally the easiest thing. The editor could have done it with a cup of tea in one hand and just pressed a couple of buttons. I mean, I'm talking about, bearing in mind, there's a whole area of that production of the BAFTAs that is only looking for stuff that needs to be removed. Two reasons. One is time, because the event itself is about three and a half hours long, and it's only broadcast on air on TV for 2 or something, so they cut out some of the minor awards. And the second thing they're looking at is people swearing, people libeling, people being too political, and stuff like... If somebody had a scrap, for example, on stage, they would have removed it. It would never have been seen. But for some reason, in all of that, despite it being literally either some specific person's job or a group of people's jobs, they weren't able to remove the N-word from a broadcast. I think the smart money is that they just thought, no, it's a guy with Tourette's. It would be wrong to cut out his condition. That would be disableist to do that. So they didn't do it. That's the only thing that I can think of. In fact, it was our Amy that mentioned that yesterday, and I've nicked the idea. But it must be that. It can't be anything else. We'll do the Voice of Doom after the break. Don't go away. Have we got a winner? Find out next.
Across the UK on DAB+. On YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This from Becca, who says, having worked in the NHS, the wastage is obscene. £6 for a packet of pens, £9 for a light bulb and someone to replace an old one. Standard computer chairs, £190, all because they have to use certain suppliers. They did talk, didn't they, about... Was it Westra? Probably Westra. They all say so much before the election, don't they? What was it? A pack of A4? Was a pack of A4 paper from Amazon Basics it's a couple of quid, and I think even in Tesco, it's not much more. And that was about £17 or something they were paying because they had a certain supply. I mean, has that stuff not stopped? Surely that stops that stops now, as they say. Just before we speak to Cindy and to Simon, Voice of Doom, have we got a winner? Right, this is the voice. It's a mystery voice, but it's political. This is the voice, day 2, that we played you.
Expertise and knowledge.
Can we just hear that again?
Expertise and knowledge.
Who is that? These are some of the answers we've had. Duncan Norvell. Dear. Ian Paisley, Nicola Sturgeon, George Robertson, Ramsay MacDonald, Daniel Zeischer, Nicholas Ridley, Alex Burkhart, Sir John Hayes, Ian Blackford, Nick Gibb, Ian Lang, John Swinney. No. None of those. We haven't got a right answer. It rolls over. It's back tomorrow right here on Talk. Cindy is in Michigan in the United States, of course. Cindy, how are you doing?
Oh, great, and a wonderful show, Ian.
Thank you. Nice to have you with us again. What are you thinking?
You know what? I think it's that people are making a complete big deal out of this. It's only words. It's just words. And this young man has a problem, like an illness.
Yeah.
He can't control it, and we all know that. There's been years upon years of research. He truly cannot control it. And it's just words. Who cares? That's what I say.
And the context of the word is obviously, not a desirable word for anybody to be using,
right,
and in any other walk of life would get somebody fired. However, the context is quite easy to understand. It's a bloke with Tourette who a couple of years ago told the Queen to F off, who called a gay man a paedophile, who's told old people where to go in more colourful terms, and has done this throughout his life. He controls it much better than he used to, but in certain contexts, it will happen. So it's quite easy to understand what went wrong. But the BBC, that's a whole other debate.
Oh, yeah, you know what? They had to have done it on purpose, because this is such a mistake that not even a newcomer to the BBC would make.
Yeah.
The word is undesirable and is horrific. It's just a word, but, to a lot of people it's horrific. And you know that you wouldn't... They did it. Somebody did it on purpose. It had to have. Ian, how would you ever make a mistake like that?
I'd like to think not. And, when it comes to editing...
I would bet.
Yeah, and when it comes to editing, if you do a pre-recorded interview with somebody and it's contentious and they're a controversial figure, there are many things you'd have to, whether somebody has, you can take a forthright opinion, that's fine, but if somebody libels somebody, you've got to get rid of that, because that can turn out to be an incredibly expensive error. If somebody swears and it's going to be broadcast at the wrong time, you can get rid of that. And with this, I was just talking to somebody who knew one of the crew down there, and they were just, like you've got a camera crew filming this whole thing. Those guys can talk to a director. Somebody would have said, I think you obviously picked up on the N-word thing. Apparently nobody did. No one knew what to do.
Oh, that's just baloney.
I mean, it's off the scale baloney. Yeah. Strange time. Cindy, thank you. Nice to speak. Where do you go with that? The brutal reality, the fact of that story is that it didn't not get cut out because no one heard it, all right? So it was deliberately left in. it was deliberately left in. It's impossible that no one heard it. The entire might of a BBC crew of very experienced directors, producers, editors, floor managers, camera, sound. But a sound guy, right, the sound guy. If no one else, bloke with a pair of headphones on, making sure everything's monitored. The host's mic is on, the guest mic is on, we'll turn that mic down because that's not needed. He would have gone, yeah, you obviously, you clocked that, didn't you, gallery? Or because he might have been sitting in the theatre, I don't know, you know, who knows? It doesn't matter where. It's irrelevant where you were sitting, whether you were in a van outside or whether you were in the room next door. It doesn't matter. It's the same point. It's impossible they didn't not hear it. That much we know. More coming from you in a couple of moments. 0344 499 1000. We're also going to talk about a minister for men. Is that a good idea? A minister for men? Some people think so. Find out who and why next on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. What about, you know, that whole area of, you know, there's an International Women's Day, but there's not an International Men's Day. There's a minister for women. There's not a minister for men. Should there be one? Well, one Conservative MP thinks so. Dr. Luke Evans has proposed the role. He highlighted the increasing number of suicides in men as a major problem. He's with us now, Dr. Luke Evans. Good afternoon to you, Luke.
Hi, Ian. Great to be here.
It's interesting that you allude to the number of suicides in men, which is absolutely correct. And it's interesting how that doesn't get the publicity or the acknowledgement that it really should do. But actually, there is a whole list of other things, aren't there, in addition to that? Whether disadvantages in all sorts of areas, most likely to be assaulted, most likely to be the victim of crime. I mean, the list goes on. But I don't imagine Jess Phillips taking this one up anytime soon.
Well, to me, it's not about one or the other. It's simply about saying they're complementary. This is about men and women, because women care about how, you know, their brothers, their husbands, their sons are getting on as well. And if the argument is that men are from Mars and women are from Venus, well, at the moment, the government's just concentrating on one planet, not on the other and the solar system. So the argument is that on so many metrics, be it number of people going to jail, be it school attainment, being those attacked by knives, be it suicide, it's all men and boys who are falling behind. And therefore, I think there needs to be some parity of joining this up across government to say, look, we're worried about where this is going for men and boys, and is someone going to take the reins and have a look at that? Now, ideally, as a Conservative, I actually don't like the idea of segregating into these ministers, but it seems illogical to have one without the other.
It really does. And again, whenever this is raised, and there was a TV show a little while ago, and interestingly, I knew the person that said it, so makes it a little tricky, but she was kind of accused of not taking that stat about suicide seriously, almost rolling her eyes of, oh, you're not going to wheel that one out again, as if it kind of wasn't an equivalence to any other stat that might be reflected for women, for example?
Well, you're right. So 14 men a day take their lives, and for every one woman that does, it's 3 men. And that's the real concern. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because we also know that men are more likely to be unemployed. They're more likely to be homeless. 96% of our prisons are filled with men. So actually, if we can solve some of these issues, they're going to be better citizens, have better lives, and have better relationships with women. So I think it's a win-win if we join this policy program up together. And I guess that's what the call is here. Have we got someone pulling the strings? Because for 30 years, we've had a women's minister and we've seen real progress, and that's what we want to see. But there's a wider cultural issue here, because while we've elevated women, which is fantastic, we've told them where they should be, what they can achieve. At the same time, we've made men toxic masculinity with no positive role models. And that's a real concern here, because actually in society, what is a good man?
Yeah.
In modern society, we don't know. And ask most young men and most boys, they actually don't have a role model they look up to. And the evidence backs this up. And that's really sad. So this is part of a cultural shift to say, well, we need a conversation to say what's happening to our young men and boys. Are we really aware of it? And I think the data is there to prove that they're falling behind.
I don't know how it works in the parliamentary system. I mean, obviously, you know, you sit there on one side and they sit on the other, and all the rest of it. You've been there for, what, 6 or 7 years now. Yeah. So you know the place well. You've got another background. You're a qualified doctor, so you're a credible voice. You're not a reactionary unionist, as you know, a union member. When I say unionist, just to clarify, in that respect. So you'd think people would listen. How do you go about getting a new ministerial department? I mean, if you wanted, I know you're making a wider point here, but if you literally wanted that to happen, is there a process for that? Is there in that labyrinthine world of Westminster, is there a little office where somebody sits and you knock on the door, the proposal of ministries department, almost Monty Python-esque?
Yeah, that little office is number 10, and it's down to the Prime Minister. It's in the gift of the Prime Minister to make that call. So there are a limited number of ministers, so you can't have a minister for every single identity, which goes to the core of what I was saying, is actually, do we have a minister for people and equality rather than a men's minister and a women's minister and all those individuals side? But in essence, you're right. This comes down to the government making a choice to say, Tony Blair in 97 said he wanted a women's minister. You know, Rishi changed the departments where, if you think about the energy security and net zero department, he made that, he decided that. So that's how it works. It's in the gift of a leader to make that decision. So part of my role here is to raise that debate. I mean, if I tried 5 years ago to have this debate, yes, I'm not sure people would have listened. But the data can no longer be hidden. It's so obvious that our boys are falling behind that actually people are waking up to it and saying, well, what can we do? Because boys have unique issues just like girls and women have unique issues.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, you could get that into PMQs maybe, or you could hijack the Prime Minister. I don't mean literally. Obviously, you know, as he leaves PMQs, goes behind the Speaker's chair. His parliamentary office is just behind there, as I'm sure you know. And, you know, you could just wait in there perhaps and say, Keir, I've got something I want to talk about.
Well, I have already ambushed him in PMQs earlier this year, actually, in January. That was one of my PMQs. And to be fair, he was receptive because they brought out the men's health strategy, which is a good start. The problem is you can have as many plans as you like, but you need someone to implement these plans. And that's the key bit that I'm driving at.
Well, listen, we'll watch with interest. I know you'll get a lot of support on this. Luke, great to have you with us, sir. Thank you. Luke Evans, MP, Conservative MP for Hinckley and Bosworth. He speaks the truth there. If you look at those stats, they are horrific. 76% of suicides are men. 85% of homeless people are men. 70% of homicides will be male victims. 40% domestic abuse victims. Hardly ever hear about that. Victims of violent crime. 64% longer prison sentences. 92% of deaths in the workplace are men. 3-4 times more likely than a woman to be imprisoned for the same crime. I mean, the list goes on. You know, it's not like there's not a bit of evidence to support this. This in from Steve. He says, I'm 69, Ian. I remember John's Not Mad, the BBC documentary at the time. It made me laugh then. But since then, what I've realised, what a serious problem Tourette's is. It's a mental health issue and I struggle with it myself now. but thankfully I can just about control it. Steve, thank you for that. Interesting one from John in Dartford. Says, surely the N-word is offensive because of the intent of the speaker. If it were the word itself, surely then the black community would not use it when speaking about other black people, as there was clearly no ill intent in this case. Isn't this all faux outrage? If not, then maybe it's time for all to stop using the word. That would make it unacceptably clear to all. That's a very good point, because you do get some people who use it casually. I know lots of black people who hate anyone using it, even if they're another black person, but it's used in music. I mean, man alive, it's rare. I don't even know how it gets a free pass in the music world, by the way. How does that get a free pass? Do they have the same people producing those songs as produced the BAFTAs? Is that what it is? It could be that. But, I mean, you can listen to certain artists. I mean, I'm talking about artists that, you know, household names if you know about a certain genre of music, and it'll just be littered with that word. It is not even hidden. You know, it'll be written down on the lyrics list if you want to search it out. I mean, that is curious in itself. But the excuse would be intent, as John in Dartford has just said. You know, it's a black rapper talking about life on the streets of New York or something, and he bumps into his mate and that word gets bandied around in the following lyric. The argument would be, well, it's not used offensively, or then you get somebody go, hey, it's got an A on the end, not an ER, that's the difference. Well, I'm not sure if that's a bit too nuanced, frankly, but nonetheless, the intent would be, well, you know, it's a black artist using it about a black mate telling a story of two guys on the streets of the Bronx. Intent. John Davidson, who was the person that said it at the BAFTA Awards, the intent was clearly not to go, I'm going to turn up and be all racial. I'm going to do a bit of Bernard Manning over there at the BAFTAs. I don't think that was the thinking. This is Carl in Liverpool. Back to migration. Carl, what have you got for us? Hi.
Hi, Ian. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
It was just earlier on, you were talking about how do we stop it, and it's political will, isn't it, really? Whatever party's in, political will, because we all know they can erect massive tents, Nightingale tents during COVID. You can do it. You can do it.
Yeah.
They're just not interested. And if I may just touch on what Mr. Pansky said the other day about free homes, free cars, everything free. Labour are already doing that for us. He just wants to ramp it up. I mean, I don't know why we listen to this guy, because the British people won't fall for it again.
Yeah, I think that's
that's the problem. You know.
It is a fair point. Great call. Short and sweet, Carl. Love it. Thank you very much indeed. Carl in Liverpool. More comments from you. Chris in Newbury. So the NHS was the most successful health system in the world, apart from one metric, keeping people healthy. Yeah, I mean, we just spoke to a doctor earlier, and he was talking about a survey where, you know, value for money. OK, that was one of the metrics that was used on the... I can't remember who it was that carried out the survey. It was some sort of international survey. So value for money, you know, per capita, for amount you put into what you get, you could say it is one of the most successful in the world. They managed to run all of that for less than an American would pay for their healthcare, or an Australian would pay for theirs, whether it's coming at source from taxation or whether you're paying it privately. And what we get back is still pretty good. And that's true. And that actually is quite a good way to look at the health service. For what we get, it's good, but we're expecting too much, because we're not going to get all these big outcomes for the amount that goes in and the way the system is run. It's just not going to... So you'll get some of it. You know, and we know that, you know, there's plenty of sort of more than anecdotal evidence of people who get very mixed responses to certain ailments, particularly when you reach a certain age. You might find that, you know, you could, well, you know, you're 87 now, I'm not sure we should be really looking too much at the old prostate at this age. You know, there's a bit of that, I think, happens. But other things too, you know, there's, you know, do you invite a patient back to a further consultation? So you have an illness, you see the consultant a few months after the operation, and then you see the consultant again maybe in 6 months. You have a scan, see the consultant. 6 months later, you have a scan, see the consultant. And that might go on for a while, depending on what you've had. And I know this from experience in my own family, and it's the weirdest sort of thing in your diary. Scan, consultant, because the consultant tells you what's on the scan? Is everything there? And you go for the, you go there and they tell you, you go, great, the scan's fine. And then one day you go, oh, the scan's not so far. Okay, here we go. We'll start again. But then how long do you carry those things on for? If somebody is clear, they're given the all clear, do they go back in a year's time? Well, they wouldn't do that because that would be seen as a waste of money. If you're on the private over there in the States, you can probably go back on a weekly basis. So there's the kind of obvious difference. 0344 499 1000. Matt is in Cheshire on immigration. Matt, what have you got for us?
Hi, good afternoon, Ian.
Afternoon.
I'm going to give you a pretty hard-line approach.
Yeah.
And you said, how can it end? It will never end with Labour in power. They're using it as a tool to change demographics and to disrupt and frighten communities, especially women. When a government favours unwanted illegal immigrants over its residents, that is the definition of treason. So to stop it, you get the Navy or a private company, if the Navy are too woke, you meet the boats halfway and tell them to turn round. If they refuse, get leery, get mouthy, get violent, like a lot of them are who stand outside those hotels, you use batons and tear gas and even live rams above their head, like they do in Poland or Hungary. For those in hotels and HMOs, you put them in a secure field, fenced like Glastonbury, guarded and even armed guarded if necessary. You give them a tent and a sandwich, and I know you mentioned a tent earlier, as if that's inhumane, but British citizens in Manchester city centre do live in tents. You give them a sandwich and a cup of tea 3 times a day until the day they are deported. They never are allowed to leave the site, and they're offered nothing. Some of these men have stolen, assaulted, sexually assaulted, raped and murdered British citizens. So the collective should be treated as if that is the norm, until which time they are all deported. And I'm sure a lot of the British public would not mind that one bit.
Yeah, and I say this constantly, and I put this in for the usual caveat and for Ofcom fans who get very itchy about these kind of conversations. Nobody is suggesting that every migrant has any ill intent of criminality, sexual assault. However, this is the crucial bit, Matt, which I know you'll agree with. We don't know which ones. We're being asked to play Russian roulette with thousands and thousands of young, fighting fit men, average age 23. We don't know which ones. What we do know is there's been too many examples of that. And until we can work that out, I came through an airport just about a week ago today, or a week ago yesterday. There I was at Gatwick Airport, Matt, and I went through the process, and it wasn't lost on me as they were checking me and the family's passports. You know, they go through it, they have a little look at the family, or they look, yeah, they're not quite like their passport picture, but it's clearly them. They stamp it, they scan it, they look at another screen, no idea what the hell's on it. And I thought, isn't it funny that you go through all of that? It was the same going out there as well. At their end, at Bulgaria's end, they did the same thing. And you go through all of that process, but you could just float over on a boat and go through none of that at all and still have the same gain of entry into a country. I mean, when you put it like that, it's absolutely bonkers. So you know nothing about the individual coming. You don't even know where they're from.
It's criminality tombola almost, isn't it? You're literally just dicing with death. I remember Rhiannon White from a few weeks ago. That one crime in itself should lead to what I've just described.
Yeah.
And for all those that don't like it, for all the ones that are innocent, they shouldn't come here illegally in the first place.
Well, yeah, you would. Yeah, if we've had a couple of suggestions along the lines that you're talking about, Matt, and of course, I think everybody knows that if you were put into place something like that, then the pull factor would almost immediately disappear. Matt, I've got to move. Great call, as ever. Thank you. Matt in Cheshire. We'll have more from you in a couple of moments. 0344 499 1000.
and you for 2026. It's going to be the only way to start your day. It's the home of common sense. It's where the nation can come to speak about the day's news. It's the Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show. You know who you are. You get up, you graft, you work hard. I'm here for you. We want to hear your side. Promise you one thing. It is where the nation can and will come to talk. The Jeremy Kyle Breakfast Show, weekdays from 6 a.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is a good point from David in the Cotswolds, who says, "Afternoon, Ian. Is it me or has everyone gone nuts? If the French stopped 22,476 illegal immigrants from entering the UK," that, by the way, is the official figure, they did not. 22,476 of them then not turn up the next day. Do they not turn up the next day and try again? Yes, of course. Yes, so it's not like that group, that whole cohort. Are like, well, you tried, boys, you know, best of luck in Spain, Finland, wherever you're going next. The 22,000 that were stopped are just part of the 41,000 that came in. It cost us £8,000 per stop that day, not the next. Those figures are bananas, says David. I like it. David Litchfield says, your guest mentions being present but not fully there. The condition is called presenteeism and is one of the most unknown workplace conditions, but also underestimated. You can literally be at your laptop for hours and hardly do anything. And we've all worked with people like that, Luke. Let's go here to Graham in Derby. Graham, how you doing?
I'm okay, thank you.
Good. Fire away.
Right. Basically, you mentioned that there were 600 crossings yesterday with regards to these fighting fit young guys.
Yeah.
And what I would be doing is to say that, OK, you come over here, but you can't stay here. We're going to send you over to the Ukraine to fight for the cause.
Yeah, that would probably be a sobering thought, wouldn't it? You thought you were off in a B&B in Brighton for a couple of weeks or months or years.
Exactly. They think twice about getting on that boat, thinking that they're going to be shipped out to Ukraine.
Oh yeah, did you not know about national service, guys? No, what? Nobody told me that. Yeah, it's a new thing.
They want to be a British citizen or whatever in the system. And that's what you get, mate. So that's what you've got.
That's what you've got. It's a good point, Graham. Thank you very much indeed for that. 0344 499 1000. Will any political party, we know that all the main political parties and some of the new ones as well are claiming they're on it. Now, the Labour government are literally in power. What makes it more unforgivable than Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson, all of these prime ministers oversaw tens of thousands of these young men coming into the country. But, of course, the Labour Party had notice on this. They had many years of notice. If you want to, in totality, they had 14 years. But let's just talk about from when Keir was really on the block. They, really had a good half-decade or more to get this thing straight. They could have sorted this out. They could have come in with the mother of all plans. So it's actually worse. They're worse than any of the others because they They could have had a plan to sort it. They chose not to. Nigel Farage says he will sort it. Rupert Lowe says he will properly sort it. Doesn't believe that Nigel Farage will. Ben Habib, I think, would probably echo more of Rupert Lowe's position than that of Reform UK. So we're in this really bizarre, the messy old cul-de-sac that no one can simply start. You think of what we can do with AI. Think of what Elon Musk does with a rocket. He can let one off and then get it to reverse back into its pod. All this stuff, we cannot stop a rubber boat coming over the English Channel. It is just mental. Speaking of which, Kevin O'Sullivan.
Hello, Ian.
Hello, Kev. How are you?
Mental, speaking of which, it's me, yes. By an extraordinary coincidence, Ben Habib will join us after the 4 o'clock news. We will get his take on the massive invasion of 545 migrants yesterday. We actually reported this on Drive last night because I have a guy down in Folkestone who keeps an eye on these things. He's sending me messages through this. They're piling over, hundreds of them. Because, of course, it was the first day it's been nice weather for weeks on end.
Absolutely.
And he says that the wind has returned now, so there'll be no boats today. Or he said, but next Tuesday, he said, I guarantee you there will be an armada coming across again because the forecast is very calm again. So proving that the only deterrent to these migrants is the weather. The government, our gormless government, offers no deterrent whatsoever except for enticements. They just offer enticements.
Can't they cloud seed? I mean, apparently that a lot of that goes on.
I wouldn't put it past them. Do you remember all of Priti Patel's plans? If I had plans for like jet skis, all patrols. Of that. But my favourite Priti Patel plan was to have a massive boat in the middle of the channel with the big nets that would go down into the channel.
She was creating sort of a Home Alone on the channel, wasn't she? That was the idea.
Like fishing for migrants.
Indeed. A big kind of rubber sledgehammer, Timmy Mallet style, wheeling off the Ark Royal.